At the same time, the South Ming Army's pride and arrogance had been destroyed. A few minutes ago, no one thought that the Five-Star Army would really open fire. Even if the field cannons were pushed out, they still thought that the other party was just trying to scare them. Moreover, even if the cannons were to be fired, they had the advantage of the city walls, and their safety would be guaranteed for a short period of time. They were the army of the southern Ming dynasty. Although they used to follow the king of 3 provinces, Zhu Huichen, there were still many soldiers who had seen the world. They had seen the so-called red barbarian cannons that were loaded with live ammunition before. Other than looking quite scary, their power was only SOSO. It was impossible for them to destroy the city walls with a single wave of attacks. As long as they were given time, they would be able to defend the city and send reinforcements. With the support of the Southern Ming dynasty, as long as reinforcements continuously arrived, the Five-Star Army would definitely be defeated. It was because they had underestimated the Five-Star Army's cannons and cannons that they did not know that the power of the cannons was not something that real cannons could compare to. This caused them to walk further and further down the wrong path. When the cannonballs landed on the city gate tower, their power began to explode. Not only did they create a deep hole in the city wall, but the people within a dozen steps were either killed or injured. Only then did the Southern Ming Army feel fear. However, it was too late now. The 10 cannonballs were only the first wave of probing attacks. After adjusting the coordinates, more and more cannonballs were fired at the city gate tower. Immediately, there were cries of ghosts and howls of wolves. Blood and limbs flew everywhere, flying past the heads of the terrified Southern Ming soldiers. Their courage had been broken, Wang Bang had died, and their backbone was gone. Right now, the city gate tower of Sea City was in chaos. Under the bombardment of cannonballs, there seemed to be no place that was safe. Everyone was fleeing in all directions. Often, when one went east, others would go west. However, in the end, they were all in the relatively limited area below the city gate tower. In the chaos, the generals could not find the soldiers, and the soldiers could not find the generals. Even if they wanted to resist, it would be futile. It was during this chaos that the 2 cannons lowered their muzzles and began to fire at the west gate of Sea City. At this moment, Tian, who had told Division Commander Xiao Feng to organize the world's first cavalry army and prepare to charge. Not only that, behind the world's first cavalry army, Meng's 2nd Division and Meng 3rd Division were also prepared to enter and clean up the battlefield. This time, in order to intimidate the Southern Ming, Yang Qindong had sent out 3 armies and 1 division. Chapter 1604. In other words, if you were a piece of rat poop, you would spoil the entire pot of soup. A person could be hot-headed and not care about their own fate for their own selfish desires. However, it was impossible for a person to not care about the feelings of their loved ones. To be an official in Yangxia, the most basic requirement was that one's family background must be clean and they must have enough relatives. For example, if an orphan suddenly appeared out of nowhere, it would not be a problem for you to join the army. However, if you wanted to be an official, it would be impossible. This was a hard and fast rule that Yang Qindong had requested. Being an official for 1,000 miles was only for money. This was a rule that had been passed down for thousands of years by the ancestors. There must be a reason for it. Yang Qindong did not want to test people, and he did not have the time to do so. Because of this, it was better to take advantage of these people's weaknesses. As long as all the officials had scruples before doing anything, they would not dare to take risks easily. This would greatly reduce the crime rate of the officials. Because of the implementation of this set of policies, the integrity of the officials in the Yang faction had never been a problem. Perhaps there were some mediocre officials who did not do anything, but there was no one who was greedy. This was the result of Yang Qindong making use of family and friendship to make an issue out of it. Speaking of which, the officials who were appointed were all very careful, not to mention that if they really extended their greedy hands, it would bring bad effects to their loved ones. They might even destroy many people because of their own selfish thoughts. Just speaking of which, as Yangtze continued to grow stronger, their future would also be incomparably bright. At this time, who would be stupid enough to take the initiative to destroy their own future? As for not being discovered when they did something bad, with the existence of Yangtze reporters, if they did something bad, it would immediately be exposed. This was fully proven in other Yangtze provinces, who knew how many officials who were sent out had fallen into the hands of these reporters. With the example of those seniors, they did not dare to take the slightest bit of risk. As for bribing those Yangtze reporters, forget about it. Those people were not in the same department as them. They were directly in charge of Bugnam, of Gojoseon, and Yang Chendong. As long as they performed well, they could even become officials in the future. With such a bright future, who would bow their heads for some money? In addition, the Yangtze reporters had a rotation system and a patrolling system. Most of the time, the local officials could not figure out the true identity of the Yangtze reporters in their territory. So how could they bribe them? When you finally managed to bribe one, but that person was transferred away and replaced with a new person, plus the existence of the patrolling reporters, this possibility became infinitely small, and no one dared to try again. The officials did not dare to be greedy. Instead, they wholeheartedly wanted to be good officials. They wanted to achieve political achievements and make decisions for the people. The ones who benefited were naturally the ordinary people, but it also made the rich and powerful suffer. When they raised a large amount of money and fought to befriend the new Yangtze officials, they found that the other party was unexpectedly stubborn. This time, they did not know what to do. Since they could not send money, they had to follow the rules. If they did not give up their rights and interests, they would be punished. As a result, the rich and powerful could only bow their heads and admit defeat, or raise their swords and rebel. But to rely on those rich and powerful people to rebel? Forget it. They were the group of people who were most afraid of death. Perhaps they would dare to bully a good citizen, but to go against the government was still extremely powerful, especially against the 5-star army that killed without blinking an eye. They did not have the guts to do so. Once the public security was stabilized, the interests of the people were protected, and there was a way out for their livelihood. The third step was to move. That was mass migration. The first to move were those rich and powerful people. As long as these people left their ancestral homes and nests, their influence would be reduced to the lowest, and they would not be a threat to the government. At the very least, the ordinary people could choose to move out, and they would be the representatives of the Han people in various places. As a result, not only would the Chinese language and culture be spread better, it would also be very beneficial to the people who were willing to move out. For example, if they chose to move out, they would receive more land, more than double the amount of land they would get if they stayed. Just by leaving their homeland, they could receive so many benefits, and it was inevitable that some people would be tempted. When a large number of people were moved out and scattered to the other Yangtze provinces, the nobility of the Han people would gradually be reflected. Think about it. If a place was filled with Han people, how could it show the rise of their status in the world? Only when there were different kinds of ethnic groups would the Han people be able to stand high above the masses. That would be the only way to prove everything. Moving out a portion of the people would also reduce the pressure on Yunnan and Guizhou. With a smaller population, the amount of land they would receive would be more. For example, as long as a scholar passed the county examination, it was proof that they had entered a privileged society. They did not have to pay taxes, and they also had the right to not kneel when they saw an official. If they were more powerful and passed the county examination, Then they would have the power to own a large amount of land and servants. All kinds of privileges would constantly come to them. Moreover, they did not have to pay taxes to the country. Over time, when the number of people in this group increased, they would own nearly half of the world's wealth with a few people. At that time, it would be easier said than done for the country to become rich and powerful. If they wanted to reform, then they would have to face the attacks of these people. It would be impossible not to fail. Zhou Xiang was one of them. He was one of the people who obtained benefits. However, his heart was bigger than those people. His goal was to continue to climb up. In order to achieve this goal, he had to first meet Yang Qindong. In order to achieve this goal, he first gave money to the Yang Xie staff at the relay station. Unfortunately, there were clear rules. These staff did not dare to accept money. Did they not want to live? Bribery was not an option. Zhou Xiang sent people out of the relay station to take the initiative to look for clues about Bugnam of Gojoseon. He wanted to see the real person through his own efforts. However, he had forgotten Ba Daojiang's warning. When the people of the diplomatic mission walked out of the relay station, they were quickly beaten up by the hooligans who looked at them. They walked back with bruises all over their faces. Because of this matter, Zhou Xiang vented his anger on the staff of the relay station. However, the result was that the current Yunnan manor was not peaceful. He had already told them not to go out casually, but they did not listen. Who could they blame? If not even one person could leave, how could they talk about meeting Yang Qindong? Zhou Xiang sighed. He had no choice but to wait bitterly. Zhou Xiang had no choice. He did not know what had happened in Guangxi. However, in Nanjing Manor, the capital of the southern Ming dynasty, the news had already spread. Because of this, the ministers were stirred up into a pot of porridge. The 5-star army and the 3 provinces army had started a war. When they heard this news, the southern Ming dynasty still had the mood of watching a good show. In many people's hearts, this was simply a fight between 2 tigers. They only needed to sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight. If the time was right, they would make a move to seize the benefits that belonged to them. The development of the matter was as they had expected. The 3 provinces army was indeed in chaos. Chapter 16:05. When they received this news, all of the officials in the southern Ming dynasty sucked in a breath of cold air. While they sighed at Yang Qindong's courage, they also cursed at his stupidity. If it was just a meeting, the hundreds of thousands of soldiers would have chosen to lower their heads. Then the world would have been at peace, and there would not have been so many wars. After accepting and digesting this news, some officials suggested that they use this opportunity to take down Guangxi. This was because no matter who won or lost, Guangxi would be marginalized due to its geography. This was the best opportunity for the southern Ming dynasty to make a move. Naturally, Zhu Qizhen also agreed to this. As such, he sent out Zhou Xiang. Sure enough, things went very smoothly. After convincing by Kuan, Guangxi once again belonged to the southern Ming dynasty. Following this, it was time to snatch the fruits. A large number of officials with backgrounds and backing were sent to Guangxi, and the southern Ming dynasty began to control this region. At the same time, in order to kill Yang Qindong, they also sent a letter to Wang Mubin of Shiping, telling him to find an opportunity to make a move. In short, they wanted to kill Yang Qindong. According to the predictions of the southern Ming dynasty's officials, Bugnam of Gojoseon was too gullible. This time, he would definitely suffer a big setback and might even be killed. If this was the case, then the Yang Xie dynasty would definitely fall into chaos, and the southern Ming dynasty would take this opportunity to snatch more benefits. There were even some officials who directly cried in the imperial court, praising their ancestors for their blessings. Once Bugnam of Gojoseon died, the Yang Xie dynasty would fall into chaos, and the great Ming dynasty would rise. Once they expanded their strength, they would be able to take down Ming one day and unify the world. There were even officials who suggested that they should immediately contact the generals of the Yang Xie dynasty outside. The southern Ming dynasty could recognize their identities and recognize them as the rulers of their regions. The only condition was to help them take down Ming. This way, the great Ming dynasty would be able to develop as they wished, and the southern Ming dynasty would not interfere. Zhu Qizhen was clearly interested in the latter suggestion. He asked the ministers to analyze the possibility of success and list out the names of these people for future research. Just as the southern Ming dynasty was busy, new news came. Bugnam of Gojoseon had won a great victory. Not only did he capture the king of 3 provinces, Zhu Huituan, alive, he even captured the king of Shiping, Mu Bin, who wanted to fish in troubled waters. This was like a bolt from the blue that struck the southern Ming dynasty's imperial court, making everyone unable to believe that all this was true. Didn't the news say that Bugnam of Gojoseon only brought 500 people into Southern Cloud Prefecture? In the Southern Cloud Manor, Zhu Huihua had an army of tens of thousands. How could he lose against 500 people in his own territory? Unable to digest this result, Zhu Qizhen questioned loudly in the imperial court, "Could it be that Yang Qindong is immortal? You still can't kill him?" In the face of the emperor's anger and questioning, the officials all bowed their heads. No one could answer, no one could explain, because this was something they couldn't figure out in their hearts. Fortunately, someone in the imperial court immediately opened his mouth and raised another question. Once Bugnam of Gojoseon dealt with Zhu Huihua and Mu Bin, wouldn't that be equivalent to settling Yunnan and Guizhou? Wouldn't that mean that he was going to fight for Guangxi next? After all, Yang Qindong was willing to take the risk to enter Southern Cloud Prefecture because of the peace of the 3 provinces. At that time, the Ming imperial court knew about this matter, but it didn't happen. This could also be regarded as tacit consent. Now that the other party had the upper hand, he naturally had the right to take everything that he should have. After the new question was thrown out, Zhu Qizhen, who was sitting on the golden dragon throne, had a big change in his expression. If this was the case, then the situation was too unfavorable for him. The great Ming Empire was already divided into the north and south, and its strength was no longer the same as before. If they really lost the 3 provinces, how would the southern Ming Empire survive? More importantly, there would be no barrier between them and the 5-star army in the future. If one day the other party had evil intentions, wouldn't they be able to attack whenever they wanted? Thinking of this, Zhu Qizhen suddenly stood up from the golden dragon throne and shouted, "No, we definitely can't let the 5-star army occupy the 3 provinces and threaten the foundation of our southern Ming Empire." The emperor's big change scared the officials at first, but then they thought that if such a situation really happened, they wouldn't have good days as officials. At that moment, they reacted one by one and hurriedly agreed. Their attitudes were quickly unified. After their thoughts were unified, they began to discuss the next step. This led to the matter of Zhou Xiang going to Southern Cloud Prefecture. After all, he was at the front lines and was very familiar with the situation there. This was already a court meeting a month ago. This time, all the officials gathered in the throne room to talk about the matter at hand. There had already been an urgent report sent from 800 li away. The 5-star army had indeed sent out troops, and they had come from Yunnan to Guangxi in a rather unyielding manner. They had used force to blast open the gates of Sea City, and even the newly appointed magistrate, Wang Bang, had died in battle. When the news came, it was like a large dark cloud hanging over the heads of all the officials, causing their expressions to become quite unsightly. After receiving the news last night, Zhu Qizhen practically didn't sleep for the entire night. At this moment, his spirit seemed to be somewhat dispirited. Sitting on the golden dragon throne, his eyes were somewhat red as he asked below, "See, city has been lost. This matter should already be known by all my beloved officials. Next, let's talk about the countermeasures." After saying this, Zhu Qizhen leaned his body against the golden dragon throne, looking very haggard. As an emperor, Zhu Qizhen's luck wasn't too good. When he first became the emperor, the great Ming dynasty had just experienced the golden age of Ren Xuanji's rule. Whether it was in terms of military or economic strength, the great Ming dynasty was strong. At that time, as the emperor, when he spoke, hundreds of officials would agree. How awe-inspiring was that? But all of this was blown away by the wind with the changes in the Tumu fortress. A great defeat in military history dealt a heavy blow to the great Ming dynasty's foundation. This young emperor had no choice but to move from the northern capital to the southern capital and establish himself as the emperor of the southern Ming dynasty. Even so, Zhu Qizhen still didn't admit defeat. He still wanted to work hard and one day fight back, unify the great Ming dynasty, and return to glory. At that time, he was very grateful to Yang Qindong. If not for this person, he would have become Yeshen's captive in the Tumu fortress. He might even have lost his life. So at that time, he really treated this descendant of the Yang clan as an important official. But who would have thought that Yang Qindong was more than just an ordinary person? After leaving him, he first returned to Baiming and helped Daizong, Zhu Qiyu, fight a beautiful battle to defend the capital and expel Yeshen. After that, he came down south at Zhu Qizhen's request. After that, he established his own faction. Now, it had developed into a faction that wasn't inferior to the southern Ming dynasty. In Zhu Qizhen's eyes, Yang Qindong's Yang Xie was only a faction that wasn't inferior to the southern Ming dynasty. It wasn't that he didn't want to look at all of this, but that the officials below him didn't tell him the truth. Or perhaps those officials didn't know what the Far East was. What was the Ras Duchy? In their eyes, a Mongol tribe like Yeshen was already an incredible existence. As the saying goes, the ignorant are fearless. If one didn't understand deeply enough, they wouldn't be able to understand the strength of their opponent. But now, after the 5-star army took down Yunnan and Guizhou, they sent troops to Guangxi. They even dared to openly oppose the southern Ming dynasty. Chapter 1606. It was precisely because he understood the military strength of the southern Ming Empire very well that he stood up against King Shiping when the 3 provincial kings invited King Wu Nen to join Yunnan Manor. He even asked the emperor to issue an imperial edict stating that the 3 provinces had been the land of the southern Ming Empire since ancient times, and no one had the right to make decisions about it. Unfortunately, no one listened to his suggestion at that time. Because of this, there were many people who secretly laughed at his courage. As the Minister of War of the Southern Ming, he should be very courageous. How could he achieve great things if he was so careful? Not only the ordinary officials, even Zhu Qizhen didn't agree with this decision. In his opinion, this was a chance to kill Yang Qindong. If he issued an edict, what would he do if Yang Qindong didn't go to Yunnan Manor? Wouldn't he be helping his opponent? However, he never thought that Zhu Huiyun was so incompetent, and Mu Bin was such a waste. They actually allowed Yang Qindong to succeed. As a result, the relationship between the southern Ming and the 5-star army was so tense that they had to use weapons. If he knew this would happen, it would be great if Zhu Qizhen listened to Kuang Ye's words. At least that way, Yang Qindong would lose an excuse to go to war with the southern Ming. This way, the righteousness would be on his side. If Yang Qindong still dared to send troops, he could use the excuse of punishing the thief to announce to the world and lead everyone to attack Bugnam of Gojoseon. But now, The righteousness was in the other party's hands. Now that the other party sent troops, it became a righteous move. This made Zhu Qizhen very difficult. Only then did he want to ask Kuang Yi, the Minister of War, if he had a better idea. When his name was called, Kuang Yi, who originally didn't want to speak, could only hold his board and walk out of the line. He lowered his head and said, "Emperor, in this official's opinion, the 5-star army now holds the righteousness. If we fight with them over Guangxi, it is unreasonable." Unreasonable? The entire southern Ming is my world. Doesn't Guangxi belong to the southern Ming? How is it unreasonable? Although he knew that Kuang Yi was speaking the truth, his words still caused Zhu Qizhen to be quite dissatisfied. Exactly. All lands under the heavens belong to the emperor. All lands by the emperor's shores belong to the emperor. His Majesty is only taking back Guangxi's administrative authority. How could it be unreasonable? Your Excellency, is your buttocks crooked? The Minister of Works, Wei Luo, took the initiative to stand up and criticize Kuang Yi. In the past, the Southern Ming Dynasty's Minister of Works was Jiang Yuan. However, this person had once harmed Yang Qindong's 7th Madam, Su Man Er's family. After the order was given, the members of the Security Bureau hidden in the Southern Ming Dynasty gathered evidence of corruption and made their move. They announced it to the world and caused Zhu Qizhen to be shaken. In the end, they were killed and their family members were exiled. After avenging the 7th Madam, Wei Luo took over the position. Ever since he took over the position, he had been living a life of suffocation. There was no other reason other than his lack of experience. In addition, the Ministry of Works had not built much over the years and had spent a lot of money, but most of the firearms produced were not up to standard. Because of this matter, the Minister of War, Kuang Yi, had complained to him many times. Now that he finally had a chance to use this opportunity, how could he give up on it? After hearing Wei Luo's words, Kuang Yi did not say anything. Instead, he shook his head and bowed to Zhu Qizhen before returning to his original position. He would not lower himself to the same level as Wei Luo. Wei Luo had relied on flattery and gifts to obtain the position of Minister of Works. In reality, he did not have any ability at all. It was precisely because there were too many people like him who did not care about politics that the Southern Ming Dynasty had not improved much over the years. Kuang Yi did not say anything, but his attitude was clearly expressed. Zhu Qizhen thought to himself, "Are we really going to give up on Guangxi?" With this thought, he could not help but shake his head. Then, his gaze fell on the Minister of Revenue, Wang Zhua. As the Minister of Revenue, he was in charge of money. Wherever the Southern Ming Dynasty needed money, he would not be able to do so. Zhu Qizhen naturally would not ask about small matters. Now that he had asked, it proved that the money used was not small. It had to be said that over the years, the Southern Ming Dynasty's Ministry of Revenue still had some savings. Not to mention other things, just the amount of money obtained from selling those people to Yang. She was enough to fill up the national treasury for a time. It was because of this that the Southern Ming Dynasty's army continued to expand over the years, reaching an astonishing number of 5 million soldiers. After being called by the emperor, Wang's was stood up with a board in his hand. Reporting to the emperor, the Ministry of Revenue has some savings. In an emergency, we can mobilize 15 million taels. Good. Transfer the money, transfer the troops, and transfer the provisions. Finally hearing this good news, Zhu Qizhen immediately became spirited. His voice also became louder. This meant that war was about to begin. When the other officials heard this, their faces all changed. Everyone knew that once the war machine was activated, the money would be spent like water. As long as the operation was good, there was a great chance of getting money. Some people couldn't help but blush when they thought of the benefits they could earn. However, there were some people who thought even further. Were they about to start a war with the five-star army? If they really fought, what were their chances of winning? If they won, then everything would be fine. However, what if they lost? It wouldn't be wrong to say that this was a kingdom war. If that was the case, then there was no way out if they lost. Many people unconsciously thought of the Battle of Tumu Castle. At that time, the great Ming dynasty was almost destroyed because of a war. At that time, Zhu Qizhen was leading the army. An army of over 200,000 soldiers could not even defeat 60,000 soldiers. Only a few years had passed. Now that they had to fight with the five-star army, what were their chances of winning? Zhu Qizhen, who was sitting on the dragon throne, saw the changes in the officials' faces. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. How could he ever walk out from the shadow of that battle? If it was possible, why would he be willing to fight? It was just that the situation was like this. He couldn't just watch the five-star army occupy 3 provinces and continue to advance to devour the southern Ming dynasty. If that was the case, then it would be better to fight. Naturally, when Zhu Qizhen asked about the money, it didn't mean that he was prepared for war. He was just preparing for a rainy day. As long as there was a slight possibility, he still didn't want a war to happen. Cough, my beloved officials, there is no need to panic. We are just making some preparations in advance. If Bugnam of Gojoseon is tactful and only occupies 3 provinces, then this war won't happen. In order to calm the officials, Zhu Qizhen spoke his thoughts. Whether it was the great Ming dynasty or the Song dynasty, they all had a very common characteristic. They emphasized culture and suppressed martial arts. They liked to be ostriches. They buried their heads deep and only cared about their own lives. They only cared about the peaceful songs and dances in front of them. In their eyes, other than themselves, everyone else was barbaric. Everyone else was uncivilized and didn't know how to be polite. For example, fighting and killing was one of the signs of uncivilized behavior. As long as they could live a peaceful life, why would they care if other people were living in an abyss of suffering? This couldn't be said to be the mentality of all the officials, but the majority of them thought this way. Now that they heard Zhu Qizhen's words, everyone agreed. I believe that Bugnam of Gojoseon is also a reasonable person. After obtaining 3 provinces, he should be satisfied. This war won't happen. Your Majesty is wise. Your Majesty is wise. A group of officials reacted and scrambled to speak. In the imperial court, it was as if the emperor and his officials were of one mind. In this imperial court meeting, they decided to give up 3 provinces as the price to enter into peace talks with Bugnam of Gojoseon. Of course, the Ministry of Revenue and Ministry of War also began to prepare for war. After all, if the five-star army took an inch and wanted a mile, then there was no way out. They could only fight. Zhu Qizhen was obviously not very satisfied with this result, so he left with a gloomy face. The most unlucky one was the Minister of Rights, Xie Chong. He was elected by the officials to be in charge of negotiating with Wu Nan. When he thought of left assistant minister Zhou Xiang going to 3 provinces, and now no one knew whether he was alive or dead, he felt that the road ahead was a little bleak. The officials left one by one. Some shook their heads and sighed, while others had gloomy faces. However, there was one person who seemed to have a lot on his mind. After he walked out of the main hall, he didn't go to his office. Instead, he went straight to the eastern district of Nanjing's capital. He felt that he should discuss with that person what happened in the imperial court today. Previously, Bugnam of Gojoseon was trapped in Yunnan Manor because of this person's idea. Perhaps he had a better way to let Yang Qindong enter the capital alone. He looked around and didn't find anyone paying attention to him. He couldn't help but quicken his pace. If there was any progress in the work of the embroidered uniform guard in these years, the biggest credit would be to the person he was going to meet. In order to persuade this person to work for him, he didn't know how much effort he had put in and how many years of planning. Finally, it was time for him to reap the rewards. If this person was discovered at this moment, then he would become the biggest sinner of the embroidered uniform guard. Chao Jixiang, after Zhu Qizhen arrived at Nanjing's capital and became the South Emperor, publicly rebelled from Ming. He was currently the factory manager of the embroidered uniform guard. In the entire group of eunuchs, his position was second only to the eunuch Qian Sungbao. Chao Jixiang, who was never willing to bow down to others, used the position of the embroidered uniform guard to do a lot of work. For example, even eunuch Qian didn't know the inside story of the Yangxie trader that he instigated. Other than him, only the emperor Zhu Qizhen knew. This was a little different from history, but it didn't deviate from the original. Zhu Qizhen was a person who liked to spoil eunuchs. The first one was Wang Zhen, who almost lost his life in the wooden castle. Now that he was the South Ming emperor, he quickly increased his trust in the group of eunuchs. It was because of this that Chao Jixiang continued to work hard. In his opinion, as a eunuch, only when he reached Wang Zhen's position would he not have lived in vain. When he left the palace, he had already changed his clothes. Chapter 1607. The next morning, the Southern Ming Empire's Minister of Rites, Xie Chong, and his entourage left the capital. Outside the southern gate, many court officials came to see them off. With the anticipation of the crowd, Xie Chong stopped in front of the city gate for about an hour before reorganizing his troops and setting off. When the entourage was far away from the capital, Minister Xie let out a long sigh and muttered to himself, "You all don't want to fight with the 5-star army, but do you think this old man wants to?" However, the Southern Ming Empire's previous actions have already incurred the wrath of Bugnam of Gojoseon. How could it be so easy to make them stop fighting at this point? After saying this, Xie Chong sighed again and slowly closed his eyes. No matter what the road ahead was, since the emperor had named him and he held the position of Minister of Rites, he had to make this trip. As for whether or not he could complete the emperor's orders, he didn't have much confidence. Just as Xie Chong and his entourage were heading towards Guangxi, the 5-star army, led by the world's first cavalry army and the 2nd Cold Front Division, had already attacked the city. After taking down Xi City, they separately attacked Qingyuan Prefecture and Liuzhou Prefecture, all the way to Jinan Prefecture in front of Guangxi. This place would become the final barrier in front of Nanning Prefecture. Once this place was taken, Nanning Prefecture would be in front of them. At that time, the ownership of Guangxi would be decided. In Nanning Prefecture, the newly appointed Guangxi administrative minister, Bai Kuan, was like an ant on a hot pan pacing back and forth in the main hall. From time to time, he would stop and look outside, waiting for the latest instructions from the Southern Ming Empire. Unfortunately, each time he looked, he was met with disappointment. Even now, the Southern Ming Empire still hadn't given him an explanation. This made Bai Kuan not know what to do. Defend Nanning Prefecture? To tell the truth, he didn't have much confidence. News had already come from the front lines that the 5-star army's cannons were very powerful. Fortified cities were like paper in front of them. Even if they wanted to defend, they wouldn't be able to. But should he retreat? The position of Nanning was extremely important. Without an imperial order, if he dared to retreat, the consequences that awaited him would be even more severe than dying on the battlefield. He was stuck between a rock and a hard place every day. Sometimes, he would even reflect on whether surrendering to the Southern Ming Empire was the right choice. If he had known earlier, he would have surrendered to the 5-star army. At the very least, he wouldn't be in such a difficult situation now. Reporting, Bai Kuan, who was sighing in his residence, suddenly heard a sound behind him. He reflexively turned around and saw the messenger entering the residence. His face immediately lit up, and he asked anxiously, "Is there a decree from the southern Ming dynasty?" Reporting to General, "That's not the case. It's news from the Suppressing Peace Prefecture. The Suppressing Peace Prefecture's garrison general has surrendered, and the 5-star army has already entered the city." The messenger's voice carried a hint of fear. But all messengers preferred to report good news instead of bad news. Most of the time, it was not uncommon for soldiers who reported bad news to be beheaded on the spot. 1. Hearing that the Suppressing Peace Prefecture's garrison general had surrendered, Baikuan only felt a wave of dizziness. He had thought that with the strength of the 5-star army, the Suppressing Peace Prefecture would not be able to stop them. However, they should at least fight a battle and waste some of their strength and delay some time. However, who would have thought that they would surrender without even fighting? Didn't this mean that there were no more obstacles between them and the 5-star army in the Nanning Prefecture? Without any obstacles, this meant that the 5-star army's next target would be him. Right now, he didn't even know whether to fight or retreat. How could this not give him a headache? Seeing that Baikuan didn't have any other orders, the messenger hurriedly left, leaving the general standing alone in the main hall. No one knew what he was thinking. Suppressing Peace Prefecture, having taken down this city without shedding a drop of blood, Tianhu, Xiaofeng, and the others were in a good mood. Although they had been through hundreds of battles, they had absolute confidence in taking down Guangxi. However, this time, Yang Qindong's mission was to take down the city without destroying its original appearance as much as possible. This was somewhat of a test. The Great Ming dynasty could not be compared to other places. Although some small countries or regions had some cities, the city walls were not very tall. Some of them were even just symbolic. Attacking that place would only require a cannon blast or even a cavalry charge, and it would be easy to take it down. Because of this, the difficulty of the mission increased. However, the good thing was that the Guangxi's southern Ming army did not have a strong will to resist. Along the way, they did not encounter any large resistance. Often, when the cannon blasted, the city would quickly change hands. Now that they had reached the Suppressing Peace Prefecture, they had directly surrendered. This gave Tianhu, Xiaofeng, and the others more confidence in completing the mission. The two of them also discussed and decided to rest in the Suppressing Peace Prefecture for a day. The day after tomorrow, they would set off for Nanning Prefecture. There might be a big battle there. Nanjing capital. The streets were surging with people, and all kinds of shouts could be heard on both sides of the street. It was very lively. This was especially so for someone like Lu Yuan. Even if he was greeting a high official in the imperial court, he would at least be an assistant minister. Only a third-rank official or above would be able to make him act like this. Just as many diners were thinking about who the guest was, Yang appeared. He was accompanied by two people who looked like servants. He held a folding fan in his hand as he appeared at the entrance of Wang Kuju. "Master Yang Si, you're finally here." As soon as he saw Yang appear, the originally arrogant Lu Yuan hurriedly went forward to greet him. He was like a dog that had seen its master constantly wagging his tail. When the diners saw that it was Yang who had arrived, they immediately understood. That's right, Yang had such qualifications. Just based on the fact that he was Wu Nanwang's fourth brother, based on the fact that he held the right to purchase Yang's items, it was normal for Lu Yuan to lower his stance like this. Considering that the Wangye restaurant was Yang's private property, most of the people who asked Yang for help would choose to treat them to a meal here. So, everything was normal. Facing Lu Yuan's lowering of his head, Yang only nodded reservedly. He was already used to this kind of thing. To put it bluntly, Yang Yang's existence was the god of wealth for merchants. Often, whoever his goods were slightly more inclined to, that person would be able to earn a lot more. In comparison, being a little more respectful was nothing. "Brother Lu, let's go," Yang Yang said with a smile. Even though Lu Yuan was more than 10 years older than him and was the host of the banquet, Yang Yang still went up first. But Yang Yang still took the lead and walked up to the 4th floor of Wang Ye restaurant, which was also the place where he ate. There was only one private room on the entire 4th floor. From there, one could see a small part of Nanjing City in the distance. "Please, please." Lu Yuan did not show the slightest bit of dissatisfaction when Yang Yang went up first. On the contrary, he bent his waist like a lackey and extended his hands to make an inviting gesture. Yang Yang walked in front, and Lu Yuan followed behind. They went straight to the 4th floor. Along the way, many diners hurriedly stood up to greet them. To these guests who were willing to patronize his restaurant, Yang Yang gave them face with a smile. It was considered a greeting. Lu Yuan brought 2 servants, and Yang Yang brought 2 servants. The group of 6 was about to pass through the main hall and turn the corner on the 1st floor. Seeing that they had already reached the stairs and were about to go up to the 2nd floor, a few people happened to come down. They were not tall and were even a little short. The group of 5 lowered their heads and went straight down. It turned out that in such a short period of time, the 2 attendants brought by Lu Yuan were also killed by the assassin. If Lu Yuan had not used his life to block the sword, the one who would have been injured would have been Yang Yang himself. None of the assassinations were effective, and the most likely attack was blocked by Lu Yuan's life. The 5 assassins became angry. They were all ninjas, and the best among the ninjas. Assassination was as simple as drinking water and eating in their eyes. But now, under the surprise attack, they didn't succeed. They couldn't help but feel a little anxious. The 5 of them shouted and jumped straight down the stairs. Because of the narrow stairs, they made the first move, which also made Yang Yang lose his vigilance. Because of this, 2 of his attendants died, and the 2 attendants brought by Lu Yuan also died. But also because of the narrow stairs, the ninjas' range of movement was limited, so they couldn't rush to Yang Yang, who was rolling down the stairs. Yang Yang and Lu Yuan hugged each other, and under the impact of the powerful sword, they rolled down the stairs, so they temporarily escaped the assassination of the ninjas. As soon as they landed, more than a dozen people rushed to the stairs. They were all the staff of Wang Ye restaurant. Some of them were waiters, some of them were waiters, some of them were shopkeepers, and even some of them were kitchen staff. Wang Ye restaurant was Yang Yang's property, so the people here were naturally his staff. Now that the boss was in trouble, everyone naturally chose to rush out. Of course, this wasn't because Yang Yang was good to everyone, making them grateful to him and willing to face death. It was because everyone knew Yang Yang's identity. If he died here today, and they didn't save him, they were afraid that Bugnam of Gojoseon would know about this matter, and they would face a life worse than death. More than a dozen people rushed up and blocked the 5 ninjas. Yang Yang finally had time to stand up from the ground. Looking at Lu Yuan in his arms, his face was pale, and his body was cold due to excessive bleeding. He couldn't help but shout, "Brother Lu! Brother Lu, hold on, hold on." Yang Yang was still concerned about Lu Yuan's injuries. In front of the stairs, there were already corpses, and the smell of blood spread out. There were only a dozen people. Although they were tough, they were just relying on brute force. How could they be a match for 5 ninjas? Fortunately, as time passed, more and more people rushed up. To be able to become a famous restaurant in Kyoto, there were a lot of staff here. More and more people rushed out and finally blocked the ninjas' surprise attack. Finally, someone took Lu Yuan from Yang Yang's hands, but it seemed that his situation wasn't good. Yang Yang, who was finally able to get up, reached out his hand and took out a Type 54 pistol from his waist. He opened the safety and fired at the 5 ninjas who were fighting. This time, he almost died in the hands of the other party, which made him scared and angry at the same time. Bang, 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 gunshots rang out. Other than the first shot that suddenly injured a ninja, the other shots all missed. Not only did they not injure the ninja, but they also killed some of the restaurant staff. Bastard! Looking at the Type 54 pistol that had no more bullets, Yang was a little regretful. He had this pistol with him for a long time, but he was too lazy to practice shooting. Now that it was time to use it, he regretted not working hard. Gunshots rang out, and the entire Wangya restaurant's hall became chaotic. Some diners ran out of the restaurant as fast as they could. In their view, it was too dangerous to stay here. Although Yang was in trouble, it was a great opportunity for many people. If they really saved Yang here, the benefits would be beyond their imagination. But if they wanted to do something, they first had to look at their own strength. If they rushed to save someone, they would only lose their life. Then, no one was willing to do it. The hall became more chaotic because of the people fleeing in panic. At this time, Yang loaded another magazine into the Type 54 pistol, but at this moment, he couldn't calm down at all. He knew his own shooting skills, especially when he saw his own people. This time, more and more people died, and those 5 assassins, the one who was shot had already retreated. Other than bandaging his wound, the other 4 assassins were still intact. He felt that the situation was serious. Yang had a feeling that these assassins were determined to kill him. Inside the restaurant, at least the waiters were able to put up a fight. But once he left the restaurant, then no one would be able to help him. Perhaps a single sword strike would be enough to make him fall to the ground and turn him into a corpse. Everything happened too fast. From the time when the servants around him were injured to now, when the people in the restaurant ran away, it was not even half an incense stick's worth of time. It would take at least half an incense stick's worth of time for the nearby soldiers to arrive. The question was, could they hold on until then? Yang's heart was very anxious, and the assassins were also very anxious. The more time passed, the more unfavorable it would be for them. Originally, they thought that this mission would be very easy to complete, especially after they learned in advance that Yang would appear here. They were even more confident. If everything went smoothly, perhaps as long as they met face to face, they could complete the mission of assassinating the target. But who would have thought that until now, the target was still safe and sound? Although the opponents in front of them were getting fewer and fewer, who knew if other accidents would suddenly appear? We will block them here. You go and kill the target. The leader of the 5 assassins saw that if this dragged on, it was very likely that an accident would happen. So he changed his sword style and slashed out fiercely. He relied on his excessive momentum to force the waiters in front of him to retreat. Taking advantage of this time, one of the jonins in front of him shouted loudly and jumped into the air. He actually jumped over the waiters and jumped to the periphery, and also came in front of Yang, who was holding a gun. "What are you doing?" Seeing the assassin jump in front of him, Yang instinctively raised his gun and aimed at the other party. The black muzzle of the gun was pointed at him, and the jonin couldn't help but tremble as he stood in place. As a former member of the Yangxia, ninjas were very clear about the power of the flintlock, especially the Yangxia's flintlock. As long as one was hit by it, there would be very few good results. Now that the muzzle was in front of him, it would be a lie to say that he was not nervous at all. But when he noticed that Yang's whole arm was constantly shaking because of nervousness, the jonin felt that the opportunity was coming, and suddenly his body swayed to the right, then turned to the left and rushed over. As soon as the jonin moved, Yang also moved, and the muzzle of the gun was pointed to the right and fired. When the gunshot sounded, he found that the assassin was rushing over from the left. He was shocked and no longer cared about anything else. He waved his hand and threw out the 54 style. It must be said that Yang also practiced some martial arts. At that time, a gentleman had 6 skills, and he was born in the Yang family, so he was taught by a famous teacher. Unfortunately, he hasn't exercised for a long time, and coupled with the rich life, his body was not as flexible as before. After the 54 style was thrown out, it only made the opponent stop for less than half a breath of time. Then, he held the sword and rushed over. The sword wind whistled through the air and went straight to Yang's neck. Chapter 16:09. My life is over. After Yang shouted, he closed his eyes. At this moment, he could even feel the piercing pain of the sword wind slicing through his throat. Dang! A crisp sound rang out. It was the sound of weapons clashing against each other. Then there was a gust of cold wind, followed by the sound of more weapons clashing. After waiting for a moment, Yang found that he was not dead. He opened his eyes and saw Yang Lu blocking in front of him. At this moment, there was a scratch on Yang Lu's right arm, and blood was flowing out from it. Needless to say, at the critical moment, Yang Lu must have rushed out to help him avoid the fatal blow. But because of this, Yang Lu was also injured. Who is Yang Lu? He is one of the 5 servants of the Bugnam of Gojoseon, Yang Chendong, and his skills were quite good. But later, because of some mistakes, he was sent to the southern Ming kingdom by Yang Chendong, and was responsible for managing the intelligence here. In the eyes of many people, he was already a marginalized person. Because of this, he used to drink to drown his sorrows for a period of time, and his physical condition was far worse than before. Because of this, the moment Yang Lu fought, he was injured. How is it? Lu, see, are you okay? Yang hurriedly came forward and asked with a trace of concern. 4th Master, this little one is fine. Yang Lu smiled at Yang, and then his face flashed with a ruthless expression. He said to the butler Yang and the others who followed him, all of you go together and kill these assassins. Right, try to leave them alive. After Yang Lu shouted angrily, he turned around and knelt down in front of Yang. 4th Master, this little one just received the news and rushed over. I have frightened you. It's okay, you came at the right time. Yang also sighed in fear. Fortunately, Yang Lu came in time. It seems that Yang Xie's intelligence network is indeed very powerful. He can even get information about an assassination attempt. Yang Lu came with dozens of experts from the Intelligence Department's Action Department. Most importantly, these operatives were all holding pistols in their hands, which was very impressive. No matter how powerful you are, can you win against a gun? Wouldn't it be 1 in 1,000 to be selected to join the Operations Division of the Intelligence Department? 1 in 100, 1 in a dozen, 1 in a dozen, 1 in a flower, 1 in a flower. Naturally, their marksmanship wasn't as bad as Yang's. When they fired their pistols, 4 of the 5 Jonins were killed on the spot. The other one was only shot in the body because they wanted to keep him alive, but his vital parts were fine. Capture him alive and ask him who ordered them to do this. Seeing that the situation was settled, Yang Lu heaved a sigh of relief and shouted loudly, "Don't come over." The last remaining Jonin waved the ninja sword in his hand and placed it on his neck, threatening to kill himself if anyone came over. This action really made the members of the operations department stand rooted to the ground, not knowing what to do. Ha! You can save him once, but can you save him 10 times or even 100 times? Let me tell you, since we have set him as our target, we will definitely kill him. Today, we were just careless. It won't be long before you die. I will wait for you on the ground. Ha! After a burst of laughter and clamor, the sharp ninja sword in the Jonin's hand instantly cut his throat, and with a spurt of blood, he fell to the ground with a plop. When the members of the operations department walked forward, they found that the Jonin was no longer breathing. 5 assassins died just like that, without a single survivor. All of this was seen by Yang Yang's eyes. He should be happy, but he didn't know why at this moment he didn't feel happy at all. Only the words that some people said before they died flashed in his mind. You can save him once, but can you save him 10 times or even 100 times? Yang couldn't understand who hated him to the bone and wanted to kill him, but he knew that this place was no longer safe. In other words, the entire Nanjing prefecture was no longer safe. Before killing the person behind the scenes, he must leave here and find an absolutely safe place. Then where would it be safer? Without much thought, the name of Resin City appeared in his mind. Yang suddenly grabbed Yang Lu's arm and said, "Lu, Z, immediately arrange something. I want to leave here. I want to go back to Resin City." "Oh, right. You have to personally bring people to escort me." This is no problem. But shouldn't we report it to the young master?" Yang Lu revealed a difficult expression. "No need. I'm his 4th brother. When we reach Resin City, I will tell him." Yang shook his head. He didn't want to stay here for a moment longer. He just wanted to hurry back to Resin City. Otherwise, he wouldn't even dare to close his eyes and sleep. "All right," Yang Lu could only say reluctantly. After all, Yang was the young master's 4th brother, and was also one of his own masters. As a servant, he could only obey unconditionally. Yang left, and Yang Lu brought over 100 members of the intelligence department to protect him. They went straight to Fujian. There was a ship specially sent to Resin City. It was also the nearest way home. Although he had left, what he left behind for the Southern Ming dynasty was a mess. There was no need to talk about Yang Lu's identity. Luckily, he didn't suffer any injuries. Otherwise, he really didn't know how to explain it to Bugnam of Gojoseon. The current situation was already a little tense, and the development of the situation had greatly exceeded the expectations of the Southern Ming. If a war really broke out, now, how could the Southern Ming that wasn't fully prepared be their opponent? Perhaps a war would break out one day, but it definitely wasn't now. Hence, Yang Lu's problem at this time was indeed a headache. From the report of the genie guards, the 5 assassins were all dead, no one was alive. The Southern Ming imperial court was even more depressed. It would be better if they caught the real culprit. It would be best if they could interrogate the mastermind. That way, the Southern Ming would be able to remove themselves from this problem. However, the problem now was that the assassins were all dead, and the identity of the culprit had become a mystery. If this pot of shit wasn't handled properly, the Southern Ming imperial court would have to bear the responsibility. Investigate carefully, and find out who did it. The Southern Ming imperial court isn't afraid of trouble, but we definitely won't be casually used by others. Ingzong Zhu Qizhen gave the order, and the genie guards in the city immediately moved. However, facing an extremely well-organized assassin organization, How could it be so easy to find the mastermind? In the end, after investigating, they still couldn't find any clues. Yang Qindong also received a telegram from the Security Bureau 4 hours after the incident. Someone wants to harm fourth brother. Yang Qindong suddenly stood up, his entire face terrifyingly cold. Dragons had reverse scales, and one of Yang Qindong's reverse scales was his family and loved ones. Investigate the ins and outs of this matter clearly. I want to know all the details of this matter. Yang Qindong was angry. The pitiful one was the head of the Security Bureau, Yang San. After he received the order, he immediately decided to set off for the Nanjing Imperial Court. However, before he left, he reported a clue that he had just found to Yang Qindong. Young master, we have a new clue about the transmitter of 9826, Nanning Imperial Court. Bai Kun stood on top of the city gate tower, wearing a suit of armor. In the past 2 days, after countless psychological struggles, he finally made a decision before he received the Southern Ming Imperial Court's decree. That was to fight against the 5-star army. There was a high possibility that he would lose this battle, but he still had to do it. Since he had already surrendered to the Southern Ming Imperial Court, he could only walk this path to the end. He had once surrendered to the Southern Ming Imperial Court from the 3 provinces' army. If he surrendered to the 5-star army from the Southern Ming Imperial Court, wouldn't he be like Lu Bu, a slave of 3 surnames? Think about it. Lu Bu was the #1 general during the 3 Kingdoms era, but what good end did he have at that time? And what good reputation did he have today? No. Just the sign of a slave of 3 surnames nailed him to the pillar of shame, never to rise again. With such a living example in front of him, Bai Kun didn't want to be such a person. Of course, the most important thing that prompted him to make such a decision was that the day after he surrendered to the Southern Ming Imperial Court and met Zhou Ziang, his family was forced to be sent to the capital of the Southern Ming Imperial Court. Gloriously, it was to protect his family and let them go to the capital to enjoy life. However, no one could see that this was simply treating his family as hostages. For the safety of his family, Bai Kun could only do this. After making the decision, all the soldiers in the Nanning Imperial Court were gathered by him. In order to increase the chances of defending the city, he even ordered people to gather all the men, women, and children in the city. He was already prepared to perish together. This time, even if he lost, he wanted to label the 5-star army as immoral. As for himself, as long as his family was safe, he didn't care if he died. It had to be said that Bai Kun's decision was very bold, especially the action of gathering all the men, women, and children in the city onto the city gate tower. It could be said to be a combination of despicable and shameless. This was because the moment the 5-star army attacked the other cities, using the cannons, it was inevitable that ordinary civilians would be blasted to death. Didn't Bugnam of Gojoseon say that he wanted to lead all the Han people to the peak of the world and let them live a good life? All right, I'll place the people on the city gate tower and see if you dare to fire. If you do, you'll be slapping your own face. At that time, who will believe you? Yi Zicheng thought. All right. Amidst the weeping and crying, the city gate tower was filled with mournful wails. The civilians didn't know what kind of impact they would have on the city gate tower. They only knew that now that they were pushed to the front lines, they would become cannon fodder if they didn't do well. Because of this, they all cursed Bai Kun's 8 generations of ancestors in their hearts. Chapter 1610. However, this kind of greeting was obviously useless. How could a person who wasn't even afraid of death be afraid of being cursed by others? Finally, while Bai Kun was waiting, the 5-star army began to appear below the city wall. They're finally here. Humph, let's see what you're going to do. Bai Kun was wearing a full body armor. After looking from afar, he hid behind the civilians. he decided not to show his face and not give the five-star army a chance to question and scold him. Otherwise, if he was really questioned, it wouldn't look good for him. Are they preparing for a battle? Tian, who rode forward on his horse. When he took out his binoculars and looked, he couldn't help but curse when he put it down. This Baikuan is really a bastard. That's right, he is indeed a bastard. However, it will be difficult for us to do next. Division Commander Xiao Feng also put down his binoculars. His face was as black as the bottom of a pot. They couldn't be blamed for being so angry. Who would have thought that Baikuan would push the commoners onto the city gate tower? If that was the case, they would inevitably hit the commoners if they wanted to fire. If that was the case, just the words of the scholars and the mouths of the celestials would be enough to make it difficult for the commoners to defend themselves. What should we do? The two of them looked at each other at almost the same time. As the highest-ranking officers in this army, the two of them felt the pressure at this moment. It even made them feel a little breathless. Let's ask the sixth young master. Tian, who thought for a while and made a decision. Okay, but you have to report it secretly, Xiao Feng added after hearing that. Why did they have to send the message secretly? It was because they didn't want the sixth young master to be the scapegoat. As a subordinate, as a subject, they had to share the burden of their master. If they sent the message openly, where would they put Yang Chendong? Fight. If that was the case, the crime of indiscriminate killing of civilians would fall on Yang Chendong's head. The history books wouldn't record it well. Retreat without fighting? If that's the case, how are we going to solve the problem in Guangxi? However, if they were to fight without asking for permission, what if the sixth young master had a better idea or had other plans? Wouldn't that be tantamount to ruining the sixth young master's plans? They couldn't bear such a crime. Therefore, they had to send a telegram, but they had to send a secret telegram. This way, they could know Yang Chendong's thoughts and solve this problem. Even if the two of them had to take the blame in the end, as long as the sixth young master knew the whole story, even if he punished them, it wouldn't be too heavy. The five-star army began to set up their formation outside the city. The secret message was also sent out and sent to the head of the intelligence department, Wang Shan. After nodding their heads, they said in unison, "We will obey the sixth young master's order. Captain Tai, please tell us what to do." Okay, then I'll be overconfident. Tai, who laughed, then walked to the sand table and began to arrange the combat mission. The morning of the fourth day, the weather was beautiful, and the wind was gentle, and the sun was bright. The sun hung high in the sky, and there weren't even many white clouds. Baikuan slept until dawn. When he woke up in the morning, he looked up at the sky and couldn't help but sigh. Good weather. Then, with the help of his bodyguards, he put on his armor and went up the city gate tower. Before they could reach the top of the city wall, someone had already reported that the five-star army had started to move. The five-star army's field cannons had also started to advance. What? Do they really dare? Hearing this, Baikuan's face tensed up. He was most afraid that the five-star army would disregard all criticism and launch a fierce attack. In this way, although the other side would also be criticized by the public, the first to die would be him. This was something he absolutely didn't want to see. He hurriedly went up the city gate tower and saw the cannons continuously moving forward. Not only that, the five-star army also split up. A large number of cavalry moved towards the north and south gates. What are they doing? Baikuan was puzzled at first. After thinking it through, he couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. What? Do they want to play a trick of surprise? Then you are destined to miscalculate. On the other city gate towers, I have also arranged for many civilians. Unless you dare to risk universal condemnation, you can dream of attacking the city. The Five-Star Army's actions didn't make Baikuan feel afraid. He had a feeling that the other side was just bluffing. They wouldn't dare to casually attack civilians. Since that was the case, what was there for him to worry about? Baikuan's heart calmed down. However, what he didn't know was that in the sky above him, there was an air force flying over. Previously, he had already transferred the entire Guangxi region's army into the Nan Clan Manor. There were over 30,000 soldiers in the city, which was more than enough to defend the 4 city walls and the city gates. As time passed, the southern Ming imperial court would definitely send reinforcements when they saw that he was stuck here like a nail. At that time, the entire Nanning prefecture would be saved. Baikuan even thought that at that time, he might be the true hero of the southern Ming dynasty. In his heart, he was still dreaming about the beautiful future. He didn't know that nearly 300 people of the Five-Star Army had already passed over his head. Moreover, the power umbrella made a loud noise. This was because the Five-Star Army cavalry was moving on a large scale, so the sound was covered by the sound of the horses' hooves. This wasn't because Baikuan was careless, but because he didn't know what the Five-Star Army was capable of. In fact, it wasn't just him. Even Tian Hu and Xiao Feng were considered the core members of the Five-Star Army. However, they didn't know what the power umbrella was and why it was so powerful. It was because of this that Yang Chendong was so mysterious. Because they didn't know what more powerful methods their master had yet to use, it made their hearts filled with awe and respect for the 6th young master even more. Using the cover, the Wolf Fang Special Forces successfully flew to the sky above Nanning Prefecture. Then they slowed down and began to move towards the East Gate. In comparison, the East Gate was the furthest away from the Five-Star Army's main force, and the defense was also the most lax. At least until now, they hadn't seen any sign of the Five-Star Army outside the East Gate. Without any opponents, their vigilance naturally decreased a lot. This also created better conditions and opportunities for the Wolf Fang Special Forces to attack. One after another, the power umbrellas flew over and arrived at the street closest to the East Gate. This was also thanks to Baikuan's cooperation. If he didn't bring all the people in the city to the city tower and the gate, the whereabouts of Tian Hu and the others would definitely attract some people's attention. But now there was no one on the street, so they could hide their whereabouts quietly. Then they closed the umbrellas and gathered. They gathered the power umbrellas together and placed them in an empty courtyard. Then they started to check the equipment and personnel. There were a total of 288 people in this trip, except for one person who stepped on a roof when he landed and suffered a slight ankle injury. The rest of the people stood in front of them unharmed. Tian, who faced 287 people. His face was a little red, and he was very excited. He knew that after this battle, the name of the Wolf Fang Special Forces would be completely known. Leave 18 people behind to guard the equipment. They were all wearing the military uniform of the South Ming Army and looked like they had just returned from a patrol. Even if some of the South Ming Army saw them, they did not think much of it and continued to do what they were supposed to do. After all, they were on the same side, and there was nothing to be suspicious about. 400 meters, 300 meters, 150 meters, when they were finally 50 to 60 steps away, those with good eyesight could clearly see the faces of the other party. A Chiliarch of the South Ming Army had a puzzled expression on his face. He realized that he did not recognize a single one of the South Ming Army. He did not even recognize a single one of them. This unexpected situation attracted the attention of the Chiliarch. He could not help but shout, "Which general are you under? Why do you look so unfamiliar?" This shout also attracted the attention of the other South Ming Army soldiers. Everyone looked at these people with puzzled expressions. The captain of the third team was Shoho. He had already expected this to happen and did not panic. Instead, he laughed and said, "I am General Baikuin's personal guard. This time, I am here to inspect you. I say, your vigilance is not bad. Hee, the city gate is so tightly sealed. You can't be thinking that the 5-star army is so resourceful that they can fly into the city, right?" This explanation immediately attracted a wave of laughter. It was clear that everyone had the same thought. They did not think that the 5-star army could enter the city with such a tight seal. In addition, Shoho said that he was Lord Baikuin's personal guard. Just this identity alone was enough to make everyone look up to him. "So it is Lord Personal Guard. Forgive my poor eyesight. Hee, quickly come and rest." The Chiliarch revealed a fawning smile. Chapter 16:12. Since someone invited him, Shoho naturally wouldn't be polite. He called the members of Squad 3 and 4 and strode towards the East City Gate. While walking, they also intentionally tidied up the long backpack behind them. It contained the 95 style. Completely caught off guard, Shoho brought his men to the side of the Chiliarch. The other members also began to move closer to the other soldiers of the Southern Ming army. A silent killing intent was spreading. The Chiliarch seemed to be a chatterbox, but he also seemed to have a friendly personality. When he saw Skinny Monkey standing in front of him, he walked up with a smile. Then he noticed the long cloth bag and asked curiously, "Lord Bodyguard, may I know what this is?" "Why? Do you want to know?" Shoho didn't have any intention to refuse. He smiled and took the long cloth from his back and placed it in front of the Chiliarch. Can I see it? In that case, I'd like to broaden my horizons." The Chiliarch chuckled with an intrigued look on his face. It seemed that everyone was very curious about the unknown. At this moment, not only the Chiliarch, but the other Southern Ming soldiers also came to the side of the Langius Special Forces members with curious looks. Even the Southern Ming soldiers who were responsible for guarding the civilians also gathered. "Oh, I see. Then I'll show it to you. This is the secret weapon prepared by Lord Baikuin." Skinny Monkey-like laughed, then gave a look to the other Special Forces members. Then the long cloth strip was slowly opened, and the black gun body appeared in front of the Southern Ming soldiers. Most of these Southern Ming soldiers were people who rebelled with the 3 provinces' King Zhu Huitu. But after Baikuin surrendered to the Southern Ming army, they also changed and became part of the Southern Ming army. For people like them, their military quality was very ordinary, not to mention their knowledge. For people like them, firearms were something they had only heard of and had never seen with their own eyes. Not to mention the extremely advanced 95 style. When this thing was taken out, they only knew that it was an iron lump. As for what it was used for, they had no idea at all. Shoho and the other members took out the 95 style in front of the enemy, then held it in their hands and pulled the safety. "How is it? Have you never seen him before? Let me tell you, this is the newest firearm. Its name is the 95 style. How about this? There's no point in just talking about it. I'll show you all their might, so that everyone will have more confidence when it comes to defending the city. Yes. Let us take a look, and we will be more confident." The Southern Ming soldiers nodded in agreement. They didn't know that at this time, they had already taken a step into the gates of hell. Skinny Monkey and the others didn't expect things to go so smoothly. Each of the team members quickly communicated with each other with their eyes. Skinny Monkey even straightforwardly made a hand gesture. This was not only for the 59 team members beside him to see, but also for Captain Tai Tiger, who was a mile away. He was sending the signal to attack. Fire! Everything was ready. The Chiliarch was still standing together with the soldiers, waiting to watch the show. Suddenly, they realized that the black muzzles were pointed at them. Before they could react and understand what was going on, gunshots rang out. Bullets flew out from the muzzles as if they had eyes and hit their bodies. In exchange, the Southern Ming soldiers fell to the ground one after another. Their bodies were strangely identical, with bullet holes that were bleeding at such a close distance. And when the enemy wasn't prepared, the 1,000 Southern Ming soldiers didn't even have time to react before they fell to the ground one by one. The originally bustling East City Tower instantly became much more spacious. Charge! Tai Tiger was overjoyed when he saw all of this. Skinny Monkey and the others had successfully completed their mission and occupied the East City Gate. Now, it was time for him to launch his attack. He stood up and gave the order to the other members of the Special Forces to charge. At the same time, he raised his hand and shot a red signal flare into the sky, signaling to the 5-Star Army cavalry outside the city to attack. The first to be frightened by the sudden change on the city tower were the commoners who were driven into the city. Just a moment ago, they saw the Southern Ming soldiers surrounding Skinny Monkey and the others. But in just a short while, all of them fell to the ground and became corpses. What kind of powerful weapons were these people holding? Also, if these people wanted to attack them with guns, what should they do? Wait for death. Even at this time, the commoners were still cowering and huddling together. No one thought of resisting with their lives. It had to be said that this was also a kind of tragedy. Someone once said that when the Japanese invaded China, 2 Japanese soldiers were enough to watch over 2,000 people and make them not dare to act rashly. That was a scene that people didn't dare to imagine. But this was the most realistic portrayal of what happened to the commoners. This was the behavior of the foolish commoners. The way they were educated made them listen to everything that happened, without anyone leading them. Even if they knew that they would die, they would still accept it. They didn't even have the thought of resisting. It really made people angry, and sad. However, this kind of thing wouldn't happen in the future. After becoming a Yangtze citizen, they would be educated and learn how to read and learn. At that time, they would know that people's lives were equal. If others wanted to kill them, they would kill them back. This was a legitimate defense and also a result of human nature. In this way, if someone wanted to harm the Han people in the future, they would have to wait for the countless Han people to stand up and resist them. At that time, even if you were a devil, the commoners would work together to tear you to pieces and defeat you. Back in the real world, Tai Hu and the others started to charge. After the Southern Ming soldiers on the city tower noticed that something was wrong, they started to send troops to attack the city gate. Instantly, gunshots rang out, and the soldiers of the South Ming dynasty fell into a pool of blood. When Tai Hu and the others started to charge, Skinny Monkey also came in front of the commoners and said loudly to them, "We are the 5-Star Army. We are here to save you. In order to survive, please help us open the city gate and welcome the 5-Star Army into the city. Don't worry, at that time, no one will be able to threaten your lives. As long as your actions are reasonable and legal, you will be the proud Han people in the future. No one will dare to bully you anymore. I can guarantee that." Hearing Skinny Monkey say that he was sent by the 5-Star Army to save them, there was no need for any guarantees. The commoners all became excited. In the past, there were some rumors about the 5-Star Army, saying that they were very good to the Han people. If there were people who didn't believe it when they were defending the city, the 5-Star Army didn't use cannons to blast open the city gate and injure them. Therefore, at this moment, there was no need for Skinny Monkey to guarantee anything. All of the commoners chose to believe him. What are you waiting for? Open the city gate and let the 5-Star Army in. Among the commoners, someone finally reacted and shouted, The commoners were like this. Once someone took the lead, they could display unimaginable strength. With everyone working together, the thick city gate was pushed open. At this moment, smoke and dust could be seen rising from the east gate. That was the scene of the five-star Army's cavalry from the north and south of the city. Very good. You have used your actions to save your own lives. You have done very well. However, there are still many commoners like you who are being used at the other 3 city gates. If you are willing, you can come with us to save more commoners. As the saying goes, saving a life is better than building a 7-story pagoda. Your chance to accumulate good karma has come. Of course, if you don't want to go, no one will force you. As long as you stay here, your safety will be guaranteed. Skinny Monkey was still using his words to encourage the commoners. This was because this step was the first step for them to change. Under Skinny Monkey's persuasion, and with the thought that saving people could accumulate good karma, the main reason was that many of the commoners' relatives were still at the other city gates, and they indeed needed their help. Therefore, this suggestion quickly gained the support of most of the commoners. At this moment, more and more commoners responded, and Skinny Monkey's team continued to expand. Good. Then everyone get ready. When the main cavalry of the 5-star Army enters the city, we will go to the other city gates. At that time, how many commoners we can save will depend on you. Skinny Monkey was very satisfied with the commoners' performance and immediately grinned. In front of the city gate, Taihu led 7 small teams to snipe the South Ming army coming down from the top of the city gate. Those who were able to join the Wolf Fang Special Forces and pass the assessment were all very skilled. As for the marksmanship, it was the focus of their training. Not all of them were sharpshooters, but they were not far from it. When they unleashed their godly spear techniques, none of the southern Ming soldiers who rushed down the city walls were able to escape. They were all shot to death. Thousands of people rushed down continuously, but none of them could reach the city gate. The general guarding the east city was finally afraid. He no longer sent people to attack the city gate. Instead, he lit up a thick smoke and began to warn them. At this moment, countless cavalry soldiers of the First Army entered the city through the East City Gate. At this point, the scales of victory began to tilt. Bai Kuan was still watching the performance of the 5-star Army on the West City Gate Tower. When he saw the cavalry of the 5-star Army constantly moving and the ground rumbling, he had already changed from the initial fear to the current calm. Chapter 16:13. In his opinion, this was simply the 5-star Army's bluff. If they really had such strength, they would have charged into the city a long time ago instead of lingering here from morning to noon. It was as if they had nothing to do. Lord, thick smoke, thick smoke. A guard casually looked back out of boredom and saw the thick smoke rising from the east gate. Then he exclaimed out loud, "What thick smoke?" Seeing how unsettled his guard was, Bai Kuan showed a disdainful expression. He was already thinking of kicking this person out of the guard team. After all, if he wanted to follow his own people, he needed to be calm because he was a hero of the Southern Ming dynasty. As he spoke, Bai Kuan also turned around and saw the thick smoke rising from the east gate. At this moment, he completely forgot what it meant to be calm. He just stood there with his mouth wide open. He didn't know what to do. Wasn't there no 5-star Army outside the east gate? Why is there smoke rising all of a sudden? What is going on? Could it be that someone had mistakenly lit the smoke signal? As soon as this idea came out, it was directly rejected by Bai Kuan. Even if there was a mistake, it should have been extinguished immediately instead of letting the smoke get bigger and bigger. In this case, there could only be one result. The East Gate was in danger, and it might have been breached by the 5-star Army. What's going on? Where did the main force of the 5-star Army come from outside the East Gate? How did they attack the city? why didn't we hear the sound of cannons? As soon as he opened his mouth, he asked a series of questions. But regarding all this, no one knew what was going on, so naturally, no one could answer Baikuin's question. Report. Fortunately, it didn't take long before a scout from the city rushed to Baikuin's feet. What the hell happened? Tell me. Baikuin grabbed the scout's collar and asked with red eyes, reporting to the general. That scout was also shocked by Baikuin's words. However, he still replied instinctively. The 5-star army suddenly appeared in the city and attacked from the inside. Now that the main force of the 5-star army has entered the city, all the city gates have become dangerous. General, please send reinforcements. When the scout's reply entered Baikuin's ears, he shook his head in disbelief. Impossible. How could there be 5-star army reinforcements in the city? Didn't we check it before? Where did they come from? Baikuin found it hard to believe the truth in front of him. If someone were to tell him right now that the 5-star army's reinforcements had flown over while his attention was focused on the cavalry below the city walls, he would definitely not believe it. But now, regardless of whether he believed it or not, things had already happened. What he needed to do now was to send reinforcements. But the problem was, if he were to face the 5-star army head-on, would his 30,000 South Ming soldiers really be a match? If he was an opponent, why would he threaten the commoners to become human shields? Although he knew that the possibility of them being a match wasn't high. But at this moment, he had no other choice. Baikuin waved his hand and said with the attitude of a general who wouldn't return, "Leave a portion of you to guard the west side of the city. The rest of you follow me down the city walls. We will work together to chase the 5-star army out of the city." Chasing them out was a lie. The real thing was to find a chance to escape, because when Baikuin said this, he didn't have the confidence to do it. The soldiers below didn't know the truth. They only saw that even the general was going to get on the horse, and they were all encouraged. Thinking that the city was still their territory, they all shouted and followed Baikuin down the city walls. The 5-star army's cavalry entered the city. Leading them was a division commander, Taemu. He had quite a bit of experience, and most importantly, his horse riding skills weren't bad. After entering the city, he led the cavalry and started to rampage. Whenever they met the South Ming reinforcements, the cavalry would crush the South Ming infantrymen in an instant. After the cavalry charged past, the ground was covered with corpses. The soldiers he brought were all veterans and elites. Furthermore, they were cavalry and had a natural ability to crush infantrymen. There really wasn't anyone who was a match for him. Wherever the cavalry went, the South Ming soldiers would either run away or kneel on the ground in surrender. The world's #1 cavalry was simply too strong. They were so strong that no one was a match for them after entering the city. Under Taemu's leadership, they first attacked the North City Gate and defeated the South Ming soldiers there. They opened the city gate from the inside and allowed the soldiers of the 2nd Division to enter the city. Following this, the 2nd Division headed straight for the South City Gate, while Taemu led his troops to the West City Gate. As the saying goes, enemies are bound to meet. Before they charged far, they saw a group of South Ming soldiers coming from the West City Gate. The general leading them was General Baikuin, who had just been appointed as Guangxi's left envoy. From afar, Baikuin also saw Taemu. However, he didn't recognize him. Seeing that he was wearing a general's armor, he only thought that he was an ordinary general. Baikuin, who wanted to take advantage of the chaos to kill his way out, naturally wouldn't avoid anyone. He needed to kill his way out. TSK, come and die. Facing the 5-star army that didn't have any firearms, Baikuin was still confident. After all, he was personally appointed as the Guangxi Great General by Zhu Huitu. "You are Baikuin." On the other hand, Temu recognized the general immediately. This was also because before the battle, someone had drawn a portrait of Bai Kuan. It was precisely because he had seen it that he recognized Bai Kuan. He was a little surprised. He was surprised that Bai Kuan recognized him. However, at this moment, he definitely wouldn't back down because of this reason. On the contrary, he waved his spear and charged forward. Who cared how this person recognized him? He would kill him first. Haha, good timing. Temu wasn't disappointed that Bai Kuan didn't respond. He only needed to know that Bai Kuan's identity was very important. Holding his scimitar, Temu began to speed up. It was precisely because he knew Bai Kuan's identity that Temu didn't dare to be careless. Before he attacked, he had already made sufficient preparations. His other scimitar was ready to be unsheathed at any time. On the other hand, Bai Kuan's fighting strength was weaker than Temu's to begin with. In addition, he had underestimated his opponent. He didn't think that his luck would be so bad that he would randomly encounter a famous general in the 5-star army. Therefore, when he attacked, he held back 30% of his strength so that he could charge forward later. After all, he didn't know how difficult the road ahead would be. If he used up all his strength right away, what would he do in the future? Just like that, one held back 30% of his strength, while the other used all his strength. Originally, the strength of both sides wasn't equal. The strong were stronger, and the weak were weaker. After just one exchange of blows, Bai Kuan knew that he had made a big mistake. The spear and scimitar collided. In that instant, a huge force was transmitted through his arm. It also caused Bai Kuan's entire body to tremble. His right hand that was holding the weapon almost lost its strength and threw it away. When an expert showed his hand, it was obvious whether he was skilled or not. After knowing Temu's strength, Bai Kuan decided to use all his strength to deal with him. At the same time, he secretly cursed his bad luck. How could he meet such a fierce general so casually? However, it was obviously a little too late for Bai Kuan to get serious. Temu, who had gained the upper hand in one move, laughed heartily and waved his left hand. The scimitar quickly drew a gust of wind and slashed across Bai Kuan's armor. With one slash, the armor was split into two. At the same time, blood and flesh were drawn out. It was just one slash. If it wasn't for the armor protecting his body, Bai Kuan's body would have been split into two. Ayaya! Bai Kuan involuntarily cried out when he felt the intense pain in his chest. He then turned around and tried to leave. Beside him, a few of his personal guards rushed over on their horses in an attempt to save their master. The bodyguards weren't slow. However, compared to the soldiers of the world's #1 cavalry army, they were much slower. These soldiers seemed to have expected something would happen. Without waiting for the bodyguards to rush over, they rushed out and blocked the path of the bodyguards. Taking this opportunity, Temu chased after Bai Kuan. Just as Bai Kuan turned his horse around, a slash of his scimitar came towards him. Bai Kuan didn't expect that he would be hit again. His arm was hit once more, and he fell from his horse as a result. Save the general. When the bodyguards who didn't have horses saw this scene, they quickly rushed forward and blocked Temu with their lives. Then, under the protection of the bodyguards, Bai Kuan, who was covered in blood, led the infantrymen behind him and kept retreating. Take the small path. Although Bai Kuan had been slashed twice, he was still conscious. After that exchange, he saw the power of the 5-star army's cavalry. He knew that it wasn't realistic to escape by the main road. The only way was to rely on everyone's familiarity with the terrain of Nanning Prefecture and take the small paths to shake off their pursuers. The South Ming army was retreating while blocking the enemy. Along the way, they left behind more and more corpses. Hence, Baikuan was getting further and further away from Temu. He was now 70 steps away. Let's stay. Seeing the fat meat in his hands trying to slip away, how could Temu agree? If he really let the target escape, who knew how the other division commanders would laugh at him when he returned? He took out the Big Dipper crossbow from his back and pulled the bowstring. The Big Dipper crossbow was the exclusive weapon of the world's #1 army. Because the materials used to make it were expensive, it wasn't easy to make. Hence, the only army that could use it was the world's #1 army. When the Big Dipper crossbow was taken out, the so-called South Ming army became a target that couldn't withstand a single blow. Faced with the crossbow that could fire 7 arrows at a time, and the speed at which the arrows were loaded and loaded was extremely fast, a large number of South Ming soldiers fell in just 2 waves of attacks. Chapter 16:14. Some of them had already become corpses, while others had knelt down and surrendered out of fear. This caused Temu to have no obstacles in his way. With a loud laugh, Commander Temu leapt out on his horse and headed straight for the injured Baikuan. The 5-star army's cavalry entered the city, which meant that Nanning Prefecture had fallen. When the 4 city gates opened from the inside, countless commoners erupted with their strength, knocking down the 20,000 southern Ming soldiers. The strength of the commoners could not be underestimated. It was fine if they didn't erupt, but once they did, the shocking strength they released would leave people speechless. Thus, Nanning Prefecture fell. The pitiful Baikuan was first captured alive by Temu due to his injuries. After a simple bandage, he was tied to a pillar in front of the city square. Countless commoners swarmed over. The timid ones were allowed to throw rotten eggs or green vegetables at Baikuan's body. The more daring ones directly spat at him. There were even some who urinated on him on the streets. As for the more daring ones, they used sharp daggers to slice off Baikuan's flesh under the supervision of the 5-star army soldiers. This was a punishment worse than death by 1,000 cuts. All of this was because Baikuan wanted to force the commoners into a state of certain death. Now, retribution had arrived. If he had known that this would happen, he would not have chosen to use the commoners as a human shield even if he was beaten to death. Afterwards, when Baikuan's matter was intentionally spread to the various prefectures of southern Ming, all of the generals fell silent. They originally thought that the 5-star army's slogan of loving the commoners was a weakness that could be used against him. If they did it well, they might be able to turn defeat into victory. But now Baikuan had done this. Not only had he died without a burial place, but even his family had not received any benefits. All of them had died. With this living example in front of them, they could not help but learn from it. They did not want to become the second Baikuan. As for how the 5-star army appeared in the city, this matter became a mystery, and many people had a question mark in their hearts. Nanning House was taken down. As the capital of Guangxi, this had a huge meaning and alerted the South Ming troops in the other provinces. Right now, no one doubted whether the 5-star army would be able to conquer Guangxi. What they were thinking about was whether the 5-star army would continue to expand after conquering Guangxi. This was something that everyone was concerned about. Time passed day by day. After Baikuan was killed and Nanning Prefecture was broken through, the other prefectures in Guangxi all surrendered, to the extent that the world's first cavalry army Cold Front's 2nd Division, and Russia's 1st Division had no choice but to fight on different fronts. However, even if they split up their forces, their progress was still very fast. Without encountering any tough battles, the 5-star army's vanguard would often open their doors and surrender. Just like this, in less than a month, the entire Guangxi region was under the influence of the 5-star army. Yang Chendong had also achieved his goal. when he first came to Yunnan House, which was to completely control Yunnan, Guizhou, and Guangxi. In the 6th month of 1467 AD, when everyone's attention was on whether the Five-Star Army would continue to expand, Commander Xiao Feng's 2nd Division suddenly went south from Guangxi's Lianzhou Prefecture. With the firearms in their hands, in a short 10 days, they took down Guangxi's Gaozhou Prefecture and Laizhou Prefecture. This action shocked Guangdong's chief minister Yang Xian, who had been paying attention to the Five-Star Army. Previously, his staff had made many hypotheses, but they did not think that the Five-Star Army would make a move on Guangdong. This sudden action made Yang Xian feel somewhat at a loss. Afterwards, he anxiously called for a meeting of Guangdong's rank 4 civil and military officials to discuss a solution. In the meeting, everyone was arguing incessantly. Some people felt that the Five-Star Army was not to be trifled with. If they rashly attacked, not only would they have no chance of winning, it would also easily drag the entire Guangdong region into the flames of war. In the end, they would follow in Guangxi's footsteps. If that happened, everyone would be sinners. There were also people who felt that it was fine to attack, but they had to obtain the emperor's orders. Otherwise, they would be acting without a valid reason. If the Five-Star Army only wanted to take over these 2 prefectures and did not intend to start a war on Guangdong, then if they took the initiative to attack, wouldn't they be forcing the Five-Star Army to make a decision? After all, there was news from the front lines that the Five-Star Army wanted to take over Laizhou Prefecture because it was close to the sea. It was convenient for the Five-Star Army to transport supplies to the 3 provinces. This was a bit forced. Taking over other people's land to transport supplies was a bit too much. However, in the end, who asked the Five-Star Army to be so strong? This method was not reasonable, but it was somewhat reasonable. There were also people who wanted to directly attack back. The people who made this suggestion were mostly generals with lower statuses. They felt that the Five-Star Army taking over Gaozhou and Laizhou was already a provocation to the entire southern Ming Empire. If they did not attack back, where would their face be? Facing all kinds of thoughts, there was still no final decision even when the sky turned dark. Yang Xian could only announce the end of the meeting and return to his own residence's backyard. It must be said that this was a place that he often appeared in recently. The reason why he often came here was because there was an extremely important person living in the courtyard. Usually, when Yang Ding wanted to enter, he had to report his arrival. But this time, he didn't care so much. He directly broke in with a few servants and saw Minister Xie Chongshu, who was writing memorials in the room. Xie Chong, Minister of Rights of the Southern Ming Empire. A month ago, he was ordered by Emperor Zhu Qizhen to Guangxi to prepare to negotiate with Bugnam of Gojoseon. But no one knew that Xie Chongshu was very afraid of death in his bones. There were no more records of this person in history. Only some unofficial records recorded that he was once a grand scholar, but his ranking was not very high. The reason why he was able to become the Minister of Rights was because there was no one in the Southern Ming Empire. In addition, he was willing to give money to those eunuchs. Because he was afraid of death, Xie Chong walked slowly the entire way. As a result, he only arrived at the capital of Guangdong province 10 days ago. When he arrived, there was already news that the Five-Star Army had taken over the entirety of Guangxi. Xie Chong was unable to accept this result. Didn't he receive a report from the imperial court a while ago that Baikuan had built a human wall in Nanning and blocked the advance of the Five-Star Army? However, how long had it been? How could the entire territory be taken over by the Five-Star Army? Since Guangxi was gone, Xie Chong's mission was also gone. He quietly entered Sir Yang Fu's residence without alerting anyone. From his point of view, it was very likely that the imperial court would send a new decree. At that time, he could return to the capital and leave this dangerous place. However, who would have thought that the five-star army would take an inch and want a mile? Not only did they take over Guangxi, they even sent troops to occupy Gaozhou and Laizhou. This was not something that the southern Ming Empire could tolerate. Thus, he wrote another letter to the imperial court and waited for the new decree. Others did not know that Xie Chong had come to Guangdong, but as the host, Yang Xian was very clear. Xie Chong lived in the backyard of his residence. If he wanted to see him, he could do so after notifying him. Tonight, he suddenly barged into the courtyard because he wanted to ask what the emperor and the imperial court were thinking, facing the aggressive five-star army. Whether they wanted to fight or make peace, they had to give an explanation. "You're here. Have a seat." Xie Chong did not care about Yang Xian barging in at night. This was someone else's residence. If they wanted to come in, they could come in. Why would they need his permission? Not to mention, he also had some things to say to Yang Xian. "Lord Minister, the situation outside is very chaotic. It is very difficult for me." After sitting down, Yang Xian began to complain. I know. Lord Yang, don't worry. I have already sent an urgent letter to the imperial court. I believe that there will be a reply soon. Don't worry. Xie Chong was already panicking. However, in order to stabilize the morale of the soldiers and the people, he pretended to be comforting. Hearing that the letter had been sent, Yang Xian's expression became much better. Presumably, the imperial court would not blame him for losing Gaozhou and Laizhou after knowing that the five-star army had sent out such a powerful force. If that was the case, it would be much easier to deal with this matter. At this moment, he was also grateful that Minister Xie Chong was here. At least, his position was not the highest. If something really happened, he would not have to take the blame. Although his mood became better, it was impossible to say that he was completely at ease. After all, he was the chief minister of Guangdong, the highest-ranking official here. If something happened in Guangdong, Xie Chong would be punished. He would not be any better. Since there were no outsiders here, Yang Xian could ask some probing questions. "Minister Xie, you see that the five-star army doesn't care about anything. Shouldn't we also do some defensive work? For example, the teaming guard is not far from Gaozhou. Can we order them to prepare for battle in advance?" Yes, Xie Chong said, after thinking for a moment. Before receiving a new decree from the imperial court, no one knew what the emperor's decision would be. If the emperor decided to fight and he did not make any preparations, wouldn't he be delaying the important matter? He could not bear this responsibility. However, preparations were still preparations. After thinking for a while, Xie Chong said, "Lord Yang, you can order the Guanghai Guard to make appropriate preparations. However, you must remember that if the five-star army does not intend to continue east, do not take the initiative to provoke them. Violators will be punished according to military law." Chapter 16:15. Understood. This was also what Yang Xian wanted to say. He did not want the five-star army to attack because of his wrong decision. If that happened, there was an 80% chance that the Guangzhou prefecture would follow in the footsteps of the Nanning prefecture. The problem was, after the five-star army conquered Guangxi, would they continue to attack the east and conquer Guangdong? The answer was in Yang Qindong's heart. They would not. There were many reasons why they would not do so. For example, they did not have enough excuses. They did not have a good reason to attack. The current southern Ming was quite strong. And if they continued to fight, both sides would suffer losses, etc. Ultimately, Yang Qindong or Yang Xie and the five-star army were not fully prepared. 6 years ago, because Yuandong province was attacked, Yang Qindong personally led the army and fought until now. The results of these 6 years were so great that it completely exceeded Yang Qindong's expectations. Before this, he wasn't mentally prepared for this. Even if they conquered 3 provinces this time, it was because of Zhu Huihua's provocation. Otherwise, Yang Qindong would have returned to Qiqian City to rest. The situation was already beyond his expectations. The management staff could not keep up, and the army also needed to rest after a long battle. If he wanted to attack southern Ming, he did not know how much military resources and supplies he would need. Before all of these were prepared, Yang Qindong wanted to stop here. Of course, if southern Ming took the initiative to provoke him, then he would not be polite. If he didn't have enough management personnel, he could just use the old people from the southern Ming Empire. Then, when there were new people, he could slowly replace them. Although doing this would cause instability in the rear, Yang Qindong wouldn't admit defeat when facing the southern Ming Empire's army. As for conquering Gaozhou and Laizhou, Yang Qindong really wanted to open up a sea supply route. In this way, all kinds of military supplies could enter the 3 provinces faster, and it would play a great role in stabilizing the situation. With such benefits, he had no choice but to do it. As for whether this would cause the southern Ming Empire to be disgusted or even take the initiative to send troops, Yang Qindong didn't want to think too much about it. What's the matter? You guys didn't care when Zhu Huiqiang sent troops to Langsun. You guys even supported Zhu Huiqiang with cannons. You even let Wang Mubin of Shiping deal with me. Taking down these 2 houses would be considered as interest. That was what Yang Qindong thought. After allowing Xiao Feng to take down Laizhou Prefecture, he ordered Lung Feng and the 2nd Division to build a port to receive the resources from Qiqian City. He himself was waiting for the southern Ming imperial court to send someone to negotiate with him. Although there was a southern Ming envoy named Zhou Xiang in the Nanning Prefecture, Yang Qindong wasn't going to talk to him. This person's rank was too low. He had already received news that Minister Xie Chong had personally come. Since that was the case, it was better to have a chat with this person. Zhou Xiang, who had been neglected, was much more haggard than a month ago. He didn't know what was going on outside. He couldn't sleep well and didn't eat well. He had lost more than 5 kilograms. He had also requested to meet with His Highness Bugnam of Gojoseon more than once. At this moment, he no longer had the arrogance from before. Even when he spoke to a courier, he was very polite. However, even though he was polite, the courier didn't take him seriously. Perhaps it could be said that the order he received was to watch Zhou Xiang and the others. Everything else had nothing to do with him. He had requested for a meeting for several days. In order to achieve his goal, he had even taken out all of his valuables. It was all to curry favor with a courier. However, there was still no progress. At first, he thought that the other party thought it was too little, so he kept increasing the price. However, in the end, he realized that the other party really didn't want to accept it. On this point, Zhou Xiang was filled with emotions. Since ancient times, there had been a saying that there were 7 rank officials in front of the prime minister's door. It was said that the status of a servant was similar to that of the master. When the master was powerful, the small people under him could also benefit and even rise to the heavens. Just like in the current southern Ming dynasty, many servants of the big families were all arrogant. Sometimes they could even complete some tasks that only the officials could do. When they returned, they would receive some benefits. This was something that everyone tacitly agreed upon. After all, many things that the master wanted to do required the servants to complete. Why didn't this work in the 5-star army? Just from this small matter, one could see the power of the 5-star army. He couldn't even bribe a small courier. Zhou Xiang didn't know what else he could do. Just like that, the days passed with sighs and sighs. Until one day, Ba Daojiang suddenly appeared in the courier. When Zhou Xiang saw the other party, tears actually flowed out of his eyes. It was as if he had seen his family after many years. At this moment, Zhou Ziang was indeed very emotional. He had finally met someone who kept his word. Assistant Minister Zhou, what happened to you? Could it be that someone mistreated you? Ba Daojiang was also shocked by the tears flowing out of Zhou Ziang's eyes. He instinctively thought that someone had done something unfavorable to the southern Ming dynasty. No, no. Seeing that Ba Daojiang had misunderstood, Zhou Ziang shook his head and said, "We are very good here. There is enough food and drink, and there is a lot of variety. It is really good." This wasn't to say that Zhou Ziang was flattering, but it was the truth. When it came to food, Yang Shi would never be thrifty or diligent when it came to it. Using a sentence that Yang Qindong once said, if one wanted to change every day, they wouldn't even be satisfied with food. If they couldn't change, then what change was there to change? Oh, Ba Daojiang nodded his head in satisfaction after hearing this. He also didn't believe that someone would dare to do such a thing. The 5-star army rewarded the soldiers with great merits very generously, but at the same time, the punishment for the soldiers who made mistakes was also very severe. It was just like how the soldiers didn't dare to accept Zhou Ziang's money. Because once they accepted it, it wasn't a matter of whether they could keep their money, but whether they could keep their lives. At that time, their family would also be humiliated because of it. Everything was just for a bit of money, but they had to pay such a heavy price. It was no wonder that although the soldiers were tempted, none of them dared to accept the money. Ba Daojiang knew that there wasn't a problem with the treatment, but he was even more curious. Why was Zhou Ziang crying when they met again, after not seeing each other for more than a month? Speaking of which, they didn't have much of a relationship before, and this was only the second time they met. Moreover, the experience of meeting for the first time wasn't something that could make one happy, right? How could Ba Daojiang understand Zhou Ziang's emotions? After all, if he hadn't been imprisoned for more than a month, he wouldn't be able to understand that feeling. It was just that the smart Zhou Ziang would not voice out his feelings during this period of time. If he had the slightest bit of resentment, he was afraid that he would provoke the other party and leave in a huff. If that happened, he would not be able to call out to the heavens and the earth. He did not know how long he would have to endure. Not only did he not dare to complain, he also pretended to be fawning and asked, "Sir, is Bugnam of Gojoseon here to see this official?" "Oh, that's not it." Ba Daojiang became more serious when they talked about serious matters. Little did he know that the moment he said this, Zhou Ziang's mood instantly fell to the bottom. If he wasn't here to see him, was he just here to greet him? Or was he here to see if he and the others were dead? Or was he here to end his life? When he thought of the latter, Zhou Ziang's face turned green, then quickly turned pale. It was obvious that he was really afraid. Ba Daojiang saw Zhou Ziang's expression and already guessed what he was thinking. He couldn't help but chuckle and say, "Assistant Minister Zhou, don't think too much. This time, I'm here on Bugnam of Gojoseon's orders to let you and the others go. We've already received news that your Minister of Rights, Xie Chong, has arrived at the Guangzhou government. Since he's here, it's better to let him handle the negotiations. You can go back now and inform Minister Xie to come to the Nanning government. At that time, Bugnam of Gojoseon will also arrive at the Nanning government. If there's anything, it's better to discuss it in detail there." After saying this, Ba Daojiang seemed to have thought of something and added, "By the way, Bugnam of Gojoseon is busy with military affairs and has many things to deal with. Therefore, I hope that Minister Xie can arrive at the Nanning government as soon as possible. If it's too late, I'm afraid that Bugnam of Gojoseon won't be able to hold back and continue to mobilize his troops. If that happens, then no one can be blamed. That's enough. I've delivered the message, so I'm leaving. Assistant Minister Zhou, You can pack up and leave with the diplomatic group as soon as possible. Ba Daojiang didn't care about Zhou Xiang's reaction. After saying this, he turned around and left, leaving Zhou Xiang with his back to him. Zhou Xiang stood in the same place for more than 10 breaths. After pondering over Ba Daojiang's words, Zhou Xiang suddenly let out a scream. Then he shouted, "Hurry, hurry, pack up, we're leaving now, right now." In the 3 provinces' king's residence, Yang Qindong was talking to Yao Yingjun in the main hall. The entire Guangxi had become one of Yang Xie's territories. Yunnan and Guizhou had begun to stabilize after more than a month of turmoil, so Yang Qindong had no need to stay here. After all, he wasn't Zhu Huiyan, nor was he the 3 provinces' king. In his eyes, there was only a palm-sized area. He called Yao Yingjun over to listen to his work report and the next step of the work plan. Fortunately, after more than a month of learning, Yao Yingjun had begun to adapt to his current work, and he was getting better and better at it day by day. In front of Yang Qindong, Yao Yingjun roughly explained the plans of the 3 provinces for the next few years. The main focus was on the migration of the people, distribution of land, and economic development. Chapter 16:16. In the process of listening to the report, Yang Qindong would add some of his own opinions from time to time. Yao Yingjun kept nodding as he listened and then took notes. Evidently, being able to hear Yang Qindong's direct teachings was something that all of the Yang Xie officials were envious of. It took more than 2 hours for the report to be completed. At the end, Yao Yingjun looked at Yang Qindong and said, "Sixth young master, I have a request that I hope you can agree to." "What is it?" "Tell me." Yang Qindong thought that Yao Yingjun wanted financial support. After all, it was impossible to move without money. "Sixth young master, I would like to send my wife, Julienne, to Qiqian City. As you know, I will have a lot of work to do. I'm afraid that I won't have time to take care of my family in the near future." So, how was this about not having time to take care of his family? Yao Yingjun was basically handing his family's weakness to Yang Qindong. Soon, he would become a high-ranking official in the local government, a high-ranking official with real power in his hands. Moreover, he was so close to the southern Ming dynasty, who knew how many people would want his position and play tricks behind his back. In order to prevent Yang Qindong from suspecting him, Yao Yingjun decided to send his family to Qiqian City. This way, the trust level would be much higher. For Yao Yingjun to make such a decision, it was enough to prove that he was a smart person. Yang Qindong liked to interact with smart people. This way, he could save a lot of effort. Of course, Yang Qindong was more concerned about old friendships. Ever since Yao Yingjun joined the Yang faction, he had been working in the secret battlefront. It was not easy for him to lead an army privately. Now that he had to send his family away in such a short time, it was too cruel for him. Yang Qindong didn't want to leave an impression that he couldn't tolerate or trust people. Therefore, when faced with Yao Yingjun's request, he only said after a moment of silence, "Zhu Lian doesn't need to go to Crimson City. She has lived here since she was young, and I'm afraid she won't be able to adapt to other places. Without you accompanying her, it would be even more boring. This young master doesn't want to break apart a couple. Ha ha ha." Yang Qindong actually refused. Although Yao Yingjun was happy, he was also anxious. This was the time for him to show his loyalty. He could not give up just because of Yang Qindong's rejection. Wouldn't that give others the impression that he was acting? More importantly, he would feel uneasy if he didn't reveal anything that could be used against him. At that time, he was afraid that there would only be other methods to monitor him. That would also be very uncomfortable. As such, Yao Yingjun decided to try again, saying, "Sixth young master, this subject has already discussed this with my wife, and she has agreed All right, this young master can understand how you feel. However, Zhu Lian and you truly love each other, so it's best that you don't separate. Besides, you're tired from work and need someone to take care of you. How about this? Don't you have 2 children? Send them to Crimson City to study with this young master's princes and princesses. They'll have feelings for each other from a young age, and in the future, they'll be able to help them achieve greater things. Perhaps they'll be even more impressive than you, their father. Ha ha ha. He had thought that Yang Qindong had rejected him because he had better methods to monitor him. However, after hearing this, Yao Ingjuan's tears immediately flowed out. Even though sending his 2 children to Crimson City was also a form of hostages. However, it was undeniable that this result was much better than sending Zhu Lian over. At least, as Yang Qindong had said, letting the children interact with each other would be very beneficial for the children's development in the future. Yang Qindong had already conquered a lot of land, and there was no need to say anything more. His children would inherit a lot of the family business, and now that they had a good relationship with the future successors, many young Xie generals hoped for this. Now that it had fallen on his head, it would be a lie if he wasn't emotional. Yang Qindong didn't like to see people cry, especially men crying in front of him, so he quickly waved his hand and said, "All right, wipe your tears. If you want to thank the young master, you have to do the work at hand well. If there's anything you can't solve, you can send a telegram at any time. If there's anything disobedient, you can execute it and report it. The young master will support you." This was equivalent to receiving an imperial edict. Yao Ingjun once again prostrated himself on the ground and shouted, "Long live the king!" However, everyone knew that it wouldn't take long for this to become 10,000 years. At this time, Yangxie was so big that it had far surpassed the Great Ming. If Yang Qindong didn't become an emperor, the people below would probably be unhappy. Yao Ingjun left with a grateful expression, and it was time for Yang Qindong to leave Yunnan. Immediately, 2,000 black cavalry followed to protect them, and the Third Army's commander, Wu Sheng, personally led the troops to escort them. The group left Yunnan Prefecture and went straight to Nanning Prefecture. When Yang Qindong left the city, all the people in Yunnan Prefecture moved out. They came out of their own accord to send Yang Qindong off. It was because of this person's arrival that the people's lives had undergone earth-shaking changes. Not only did they no longer need to worry about war and personal safety, but everyone was also given a new piece of land and had a goal in life. This was something that many people had never dreamed of, riding on the white dragon and looking at the scene of the people sending him off. Yang Qindong said emotionally to Yao Ingjun, who was sending him off, "Did you see that? Those who win the hearts of the people win the world. As long as the hearts of the people are there, there's nothing that can't be done. You local officials and officials must remember this." "Yes, this subject will remember," Yao Ingjun replied as if he had been taught something. Nanning Prefecture, Commander Tian, who was riding a horse outside the city. There were several teachers with him. They all knew that the 6th young master would visit Nanning Prefecture today. For this, not only did they clean up the city again, they also sent many cavalry to protect him. Today, the importance of Yang Qindong's safety was far greater than that of the Emperor of Southern Baiming. There were many Nanning people in the welcoming team. They stood on both sides of the road, either out of curiosity or out of gratitude. Without the Wolf Fang special forces sent by Yang Qindong, all the people would have been killed by the cannons. Just based on this point, it was worth everyone coming out of the city to welcome Bugnam of Gojoseon. There was another group of people in the crowd. There were many of them, about 1,000 people. They were wearing the Southern Ming official uniform that was somewhat out of place. They were the Southern Ming officials led by the Southern Ming Minister of Rites, Xiechong, after Zhou Ziang was allowed to leave Yunnan Prefecture. He rushed all the way to Guangzhou Prefecture and met the Minister of Rites, Xiechong. After repeating the words of Ba Dao River, Xiechong could no longer remain calm. He left Guangzhou Prefecture overnight and went straight to Nanning Prefecture. Xiechong couldn't guess whether Yang Qindong would continue to send troops or not. However, he definitely couldn't allow the five-star army to send troops because of him. If he really did that, he was afraid that the emperor would be furious. He only had one head, and it wouldn't be enough to chop it off. After rushing for a while, he finally reached Nanning Prefecture before Yang Qindong. Xiechong was smart enough not to enter the city. In order to express his attitude, he decided to wait here for Yang Qindong to enter the city first. Although it was said that Yang Qindong already had the intention of lowering his head, but thinking about it, Yang Qindong was Wu Nanwang, who was recognized by the two emperors of the Great Ming dynasty. It was not a big deal for a subject to be respectful to a king. Tian Hu and the others could understand why Xiechong would appear here, especially when they saw that the Minister of Rites, who was so high and mighty, had to respectfully welcome their king at this moment. They felt even more honored. Didn't this also prove that the strength of the five-star army was constantly rising? As everyone was looking forward to it, a black shadow finally appeared in the distance. Then, one after another, the bright five-star army flag could be seen. It's Bugnam of Gojoseon. Everyone line up. Tian, who saw that the troops were getting closer and closer, so he hurriedly shouted. This time, because Division Commander Xiaofeng was in Laizhou Prefecture supervising the construction of the harbor, he didn't rush to Nanning Prefecture. Thus, he became the boss here. If something went wrong, he would have to bear the main responsibility, so he couldn't help but be careful. Fortunately, the elite warriors of the world's #1 cavalry army were arranged everywhere, so safety shouldn't be a problem. About half an hour later, Yang Qindong's troops finally arrived in front of Nanning Prefecture's west gate. Tian, who had already brought everyone to stand on both sides, and saluted to welcome them. At the same time, his eyes were filled with excitement as he looked at Yang Qindong. Although they hadn't been apart for long, without Yang Qindong's command, the world's #1 cavalry army seemed to have lost its soul and felt all kinds of uneasy. Now that they could fight side by side with the 6th young master, of course everyone was excited. You've all worked hard. Yang Qindong, who was riding on the white dragon, returned a military salute when he arrived in front of Tian, Hu, and the others. Then his gaze seemed to intentionally look in Xiechong's direction, but he ignored him and entered the city accompanied by Tian, Hu, and the others. In a distant corner, Vice Envoy Zhou Ziang said, excitedly, Bugnam of Gojoseon saw us. He saw us. I know. What are you shouting for? What are you doing? Xiechong also saw this scene, but he wasn't very excited. On the contrary, he felt that Yang Qindong cared about ignoring him, which made him feel very uncomfortable. However, when he thought about how his strength was inferior, what else could he do besides lowering his head? Finally, Yang Qindong, who was surrounded by people, entered the city. Xiechong also tidied up his clothes and prepared to enter the city. Just now, not only did he see Bugnam of Gojoseon and Yang Qindong, but he also saw the might of the world's #1 cavalry army. It had to be said that this cavalry army not only had a large number of people, but they were also skilled in horse riding. Under their control, all the war horses didn't make any sound, and none of the war horses jumped out of the formation, which was very terrifying. Chapter 16-17. It must be known that these were livestock, not humans. To be able to make them so obedient, it must have taken a lot of effort. Based on this, it could be seen that this cavalry was not ordinary. Xie Chong, who had learned riding and archery, had his own horse. He still remembered that it took a long time to tame it. In the end, he was only able to ride it. He could not reach the level of familiarity with it like the cavalry in front of him. Even a single horse could not do this, let alone so many war horses. From this point, this was an army that was not easy to deal with. Coincidentally, in the entire southern Ming army, there were no decent cavalry. Due to the environment, the 5 million soldiers of the southern Ming army were almost all infantrymen. Comparing them, wasn't it obvious who was superior? Thus, Xie Chong had a rough understanding of the strength of the 5-star army. In his heart, he was thinking that it would be better if he could negotiate, as long as Bugnam of Gojoseon's request was not too excessive. So what if he satisfied him? After all, if they really fought, the southern Ming army's chances of winning were too low. Yang Chendong naturally did not know that the world's #1 cavalry army's formation to welcome him would scare Xie Chong. After he entered the city, he stationed himself in the largest courtyard in the city. This was a place that Tian, who specially prepared for Yang Chendong to rest. The courtyard was very clean. There was a rockery, a garden, and a pond. The environment looked very good. You are considerate. After Yang Chendong roughly looked around the courtyard, he nodded to Tian, who in satisfaction. Then he said, "Go and arrange it. Let the southern Ming envoy come and see me." At this point, Yang Chendong did not intend to continue fighting with the southern Ming army. Since they were not fully prepared, they would stop fighting first. Of course, since he had the upper hand, he needed to ask for some benefits. He was also confident that the southern Ming army would agree to his request, because compared to him, the other side was not prepared for war. Not fighting. Tian, who was shocked. After all, for a battlefield-killing god like him, if there was no war, it would not reflect their value. After asking this question, Tian, who was somewhat regretful, he should not have questioned such a big matter. Although he was Yang Chendong's student and was now the famous commander of the world's #1 cavalry army, there were some things that he could not ask. On the contrary, Yang Chendong did not show any dissatisfaction. Let's see what the southern Ming Empire's attitude is first. After all, everyone here is Han. It's best if we don't fight. To be able to give such an answer, Tian, who was already very satisfied. Then he said, "Tian, who's #1 cavalry." Although Yang Chendong had been the Bugnam of Gojoseon for more than 10 years, he was still unable to adapt to his current role. Therefore, he gave such an answer to Tian, whose question. If it was the 2 emperors of the southern Baiming or Zhu Huihua, they would definitely not answer this question. Tian, who moved quickly and quickly sent people to find Xie Chong and the others in the city. Then he led them to Yang Chendong's temporary residence. In the main hall, both sides were able to meet. Facing Xie Chong, Yang Chendong could not be so casual. He first sat on the main chair in the main hall. When Xie Chong appeared, the other party could only look up to see him. Southern Ming Ministry of Rights Minister Xie Chong greets Bugnam of Gojoseon. Ministry of Rights Left Assistant Minister Zhou Zi greets Bugnam of Gojoseon. Dispense with the formalities. Yang Chendong raised his hand and said with a calm expression. Then, without saying anything, he asked directly, "Both of you, I heard that you are here to negotiate on behalf of the Southern Ming Imperial Court. What are your rules? Why don't you tell me everything?" Xie Chong was obviously not used to Yang Chendong's straightforward way of opening. Shouldn't both sides talk about their daily lives and friendship first before talking about business? Now, he was asking about the other party's trump card. Anyone with a bit of common sense in negotiations would not ask such a question. Did Yang Chendong not know how to negotiate? Of course not. Yang Chendong's political wisdom was not low. The reason why he said this was to create pressure on the other party and let them know that the initiative of the negotiation was in his hands. The use of the word negotiation made it even more obvious that the Yang faction and the Southern Ming Empire were on equal footing. It wasn't a matter of who was the subordinate of the other. Otherwise, there would not be such a term. Xie Chong was not used to Yang Chendong's rhythm and method. For a moment, he did not know what to say. Yang Chendong deliberately frowned. What? Did this prince misunderstand? You are not here to negotiate, but to declare war? All right, this prince understands your intentions. Please go back now. Please also tell the Southern Ming Emperor that we will meet on the battlefield. Come, send the guests out. Yes. Beta Persei at the side immediately said and prepared to step out. This action gave Xie Chong a fright. Although some words were easy to say and unpleasant to hear, he really was here to negotiate on behalf of the Southern Ming Empire. Especially before the Southern Ming Empire was ready for war, it was better not to fight this war. And if the war continued because of him, the emperor would not be appeased even if he was killed. No, Bugnam of Gojoseon misunderstood. We are indeed here to negotiate. Xie Chong knew that he could not continue pretending. In order to complete his mission, he had no choice but to lower his head at this moment. From the moment he said this, it also proved that he recognized Yang Xie and the Southern Ming Empire as existences on the same level. All right, then tell me your thoughts. Yang Chendong wanted this kind of rhythm. Facing the somewhat aggressive Yang Chendong, Xie Chong found that the words he prepared before could not be used. For example, the words that insisted that Yang Chendong was still a subject of the great Ming Empire could not be said. This was because the other party was not afraid of war at all. On the contrary, he was the one who was afraid of war. However, there were still some words that needed to be said. Under Yang Chendong's guidance, Xie Chong opened his mouth. Prince Bugnam of Gojoseon, Emperor Ingzong's intention is to allow you to establish a new power outside of the Southern Ming Empire. The Southern Ming Empire's imperial court will recognize the existence of this new power. However, the current Yunnan, Guizhou, and Guangxi must be returned to the Southern Ming Empire. This includes the captured Shiping King Mu Bin, Sanshan King Zhu Huifu, and the others. Also, enough. Just by listening to the beginning, Yang Chendong knew that the Southern Ming Empire did not see how powerful he was. At this moment, they were still holding on to unrealistic fantasies. Did they really think that he was just a king with a different surname and did not dare to fall out with the Southern Ming Empire? Yang Chendong did not make a move now because he was not fully prepared. He did not want more Han people to lose their homes and lives because of war. This was not because he was afraid. On the contrary, if he was really angered, even if he made a move now, he could guarantee that he would win this war. Moreover, the 5-star army would definitely obtain the final victory. At most, he would have to pay a higher price, and more Han people would die. It was because he considered the safety of the civilians that Yang Chendong decided to temporarily stop advancing. However, this did not mean that he was afraid. If Zhu Qizhen had such thoughts, then there was no need for this peace talk. Xie Chong's expression turned a little ugly when he was rejected after just 2 sentences. However, considering that the 5-star army was at its peak, he suppressed the anger in his heart and said, "However, I wonder what Bugnam of Gojoseon's intentions are." This prince's intentions? It's very simple. As long as the Southern Ming Empire agrees to these requests, our Yang Xie army will stop advancing and guarantee that we will not invade. Oh, this lowly official is willing to listen to Bugnam of Gojoseon's intentions. Hearing that the 5-star army would stop advancing, Xie Chong was also interested. As for the so-called conditions, there was nothing to lose by listening to it first, right? Moreover, since you have brought up the conditions, we can discuss them later. Let's not talk about whether we can come to an agreement or not. At least, there was one point that could be delayed for a while. As such, under the gazes of Xie Chong and Zhou Ziyang, Yang Qindong opened his mouth. This war was originally planned by your southern Ming Empire. Don't deny it. If it wasn't for your tacit approval, Zhu Huiqiu wouldn't have had the guts to attack my Liangshan. Shiping King Mu Bin wouldn't have sent his men to kill this prince without orders, and then personally led his troops to attack this prince. Also, the cannons used to attack this prince were also transported from your southern Ming kingdom, right? This should be enough to prove everything. All along, this prince has scrupulously abided by the duties of a subject. Even if the five-star army was extremely powerful and wiped out all the foreign races around the Great Ming Empire, this prince still respected the Great Ming Empire greatly. Not only did this prince not have the intention to attack, but this prince also provided large amounts of food to the imperial court. Furthermore, the price was so low that this prince had to use money to subsidize it. However, on the other hand, how did you treat this prince? Blindly wanting to kill this prince, speaking of this, it really makes one's heart cold. Although it is said that if the ruler wants the subject to die, the subject has no choice but to die. This prince has done so many things for the Great Ming Empire. Even back then at the Tumu Castle, if this prince did not make a move, Ingzong would have already met with disaster. Since this is the case, this prince has already done his duty as a subject. Now that the ruler wants to kill this prince, then this prince will live for himself this time. When these words entered Xie Chong's ears, he couldn't help but lower his head. Many of the things that Yang Qindong had accused the southern Ming Empire of were true. If they really wanted to make a fuss about it, then the southern Ming Empire had indeed let down Yang Qindong. This was because all along, Yang Xie had always been the party that paid the price, and the southern Ming Empire was the party that received benefits. However, the result now was that Yang Qindong had to die. This was too much of a bully. If Xie Chong had Yang Xie's powerful strength, he would probably not be able to resist jumping up and opposing the southern Ming Empire. Chapter 16:18. Since Xie Chong did not speak, Zhou Ziyang was even more speechless. It was clear that they were the weaker side in this negotiation. Even if the peace talks ended, the southern Ming Empire would only suffer losses. Even so, no matter who initiated the negotiations, the emperor would not be satisfied. At this time, there was no way to hide. Who would take the initiative to charge forward? Since the envoy and deputy did not speak, Yang Qindong continued, "Even if you are not benevolent, this prince cannot be unjust. After all, this is a place where the Han people live. This prince is also a Han official. If this prince does not have to use military force, this prince is unwilling to use it. However, this prince must give an explanation for the previous matter. This is also an explanation for this prince and the officials under this prince. Thus, I will raise the following conditions. First, the southern Ming Empire must recognize Yang Xie's legal authority over Yunnan, Guizhou, and Guangxi. These territories were taken from Zhu Huiyun by this prince. It was also because of Zhu Huiyun's request that I went a southern Yun manner. Now that the development has been settled, there must be an explanation. Second, other than Guangdong's Laizhou Manor, the southern Ming Empire also needs to open up Chaozhou Manor, Fuzhou Manor, Taizhou Manor, Ningbo Manor, Songjiang Manor, and Huayan Manor. Our Yang Xie can build a military port there. Of course, the sovereignty of these places will still belong to the southern Ming Empire. Our Yang Xie is also willing to pay some rent. Third, as a fellow Han, This prince will definitely not watch the Han people suffer. If the Southern Ming Empire's policies or the officials do not care for the people, causing some people to want to leave the Southern Ming Empire for our Yangxie, the Southern Ming Empire will not stop them. We should respect the people's choice. If someone tries to stop them, then Yangxie, will reserve the right to send troops to rescue them. Fourth, Yangxie is willing to continue trading with the Southern Ming Empire. However, the Southern Ming Empire must guarantee the safety of the Yangxie merchants. If something happens to them, Yangxie will also reserve the right to send troops to rescue them. Fifth, for the prosperity of trade, Yangxie is permitted to open banks in the Southern Ming Empire. Of course, we will pay the taxes that should be paid on time. However, if someone has designs on the bank, then we will also protect the right to rescue them. Sixth, due to the bad weather this year, the grain harvest in the Yangxie region is poor, and the price of grain will increase by 30%. In some remote areas, the price of grain may increase by 40% to 50%. I hope that the Southern Ming Imperial Court can understand this. After all, the price of rations will be higher if there is less. This kind of thing has happened many times. 7. Yangxie is willing to have more exchanges with the Southern Ming Empire. After the various ports are built, Yangxie will have specialized passenger ships to open up the waterway from Qiqian City to the Southern Ming Empire. At that time, if the Southern Ming Empire is willing to send people to Qiqian City for inspection, they can apply first. After they pass the inspection, they can enter Yangxie's land to study and learn. 8. Yangxie. Yang Chendong already had a draft in his mind. Things came out of his mouth one after another, and his requests also increased. Hearing this, Xie Chong could not help but break out in cold sweat. As for the specific terms of the negotiation, it still needed to be analyzed word by word. However, after hearing this, Xie Chong already knew one thing. That was, from this moment onwards, the Southern Ming Empire and Yangxie were no longer subordinate to each other, although they were not in the past. However, from this moment onwards, the two sides were on equal footing. Yang Chendong's ambition had already been exposed. However, even if this was the case, what could Xie Chong say? Could he say that he did not agree? Could he say that the Southern Ming Empire would send an army to teach the five-star army how to behave? If he could not do this, then it was better not to mention it. The situation was stronger than the person, and the fist was not as strong as the person. If he still wanted to reason with the other party, that was not courage, but stupidity. After nearly half an hour, Yang Chendong roughly explained his requests. Then he looked at Xie Chong's pale face and said, "This is only the preliminary negotiation outline that this king has drafted. As for the specific matters, I, Yangxie's foreign affairs chief, will discuss it with Minister Xie. You can also send this general request back to the Southern Ming Empire's capital so that the emperor will know first. However, there is one thing that this king wants to make clear. The Southern Ming Empire must agree to the above conditions. Otherwise, the Southern Ming Empire will be seen as insincere. Next, just treat it as self-protection. The iron cavalry of the five-star army will not stop moving forward. At that time, don't say that Yang Chendong, did not take into account the relationship between the monarch and his subjects. Okay, Beta Persei, send the guests off." The tall Beta Persei immediately stepped forward and said to Xie Chong and Zhou Xiang expressionlessly, "Two sirs, please." If that's the case, this official will take his leave. Xie Chong also knew that there was no point in arguing at this moment. Rather than that, it was better to immediately write a memorial to inform the imperial court of Yang Chendong's request. As for what to do next, it was a matter between the emperor and the imperial court. He could no longer interfere. Xie Chong and Zhou Xiang finally left. At the back of the main hall, a similarly sturdy middle-aged man walked in. His face was dignified without being angry. Just by looking at him, one could feel a sense of ferocity. And he was Yang Xie's foreign affairs chief, Ma Dali. Generally, as a diplomat, they needed to look more amiable and friendly. This way, they would be more acceptable, and their words would be more resonant. However, Yang Qindong did the opposite. His foreign affairs chief looked more frightening, and only this could better intimidate some people. After all, the current Yang Xie was incomparably powerful. The so-called negotiation ultimately depended on the strength of both sides. Otherwise, there wouldn't be the saying of weak countries having no diplomacy. It was precisely because they were strong enough that they needed to be tough in their diplomacy. This was something that Ma Dali did very well. He looked fierce, had a loud voice, and had a bad temper. He would often scold people if they didn't agree with him. However, it was this kind of life that was most suitable for the current Yang Xie. This time, Ma Dali was transferred over from Resin City to play this role. It was to put pressure on the southern Ming Empire. Moreover, with Yang Qindong's current status, there were too many things that he needed to do. He wouldn't argue with the other party over something like negotiation. Ma Dali gladly accepted this task. Speaking of which, he could be considered an old member of Yang Xie. He had been the foreign affairs chief for nearly 10 years. This didn't conform to the Yang Xie's system of changing officials. However, no one said anything about this matter. Why was that? The reason was simple. Don't look at the Foreign Affairs Department's reputation. Because of the strength of the five-star army, they would often destroy a country if they didn't agree with them. As such, the Foreign Affairs Department often existed in name only. It wasn't of much use at all, and there wasn't much for them to negotiate with. Over time, the Foreign Affairs Department's authority was greatly reduced. Anyone with ambition was unwilling to become an official in the Foreign Affairs Department. After all, what was the difference between becoming an official in a useless department and retiring? Ma Dali was extremely depressed because of this. He didn't believe that the Foreign Affairs Department would have nothing to do. He was just waiting for an opportunity. Although he had been treated coldly over the years, he still didn't give up. He was waiting. This was because he had carefully analyzed that their king was an extreme racialist. This could be seen from the rising status of the Han people. With this kind of thinking, they could deal with other foreign races and other countries, but only the Great Ming, which was the land of the Han, could not be so rashly sent out troops. Otherwise, it would definitely be a loss for the Han people. At this time, it was time for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to help. Ma Dali's thinking was right. As expected, a telegram was sent to the Foreign Affairs Department. Yang Qindong personally asked Ma Dali to bring a negotiation team to Nanning. When Ma Dali understood the deeper meaning behind this, he organized enough people to take a boat and arrived at Nanning before Yang Qindong. Just like before, he had heard the conversation between Yang Qindong, Xie Chong, and Zhou Ziong. Now that he was angry, it was obvious that Yang Qindong wanted to hear his opinion. Previously, when he was hiding in the corner, he saw Xie Chong and Zhou Ziong's actions. At this moment, Ma Dali spoke with great confidence. "Sixth young master, don't worry. I will do my best to ensure that the Great Ming agrees to all of our conditions." He, this king believes that you won't. Department head Ma, feel free to do whatever you want. Even if the negotiations fail, there is no need to be afraid. When the time comes, our cavalry will directly enter Guangdong. Yang Qindong didn't want to give Ma Dali any pressure, so he smiled and said, Yang Qindong was working with the idea of slowly encroaching on the Great Ming's political power. However, if the Great Ming didn't cooperate, then he would have to cut the Gordian knot and take the initiative to send troops. Although this way, The losses would be greater, but it might not be a bad thing to take over the great Ming sooner. Yes, this subject understands. Ma, Dolly was full of confidence when he heard this. With a powerful military backing, what was there to be afraid of? Ma, Dolly left confidently. Yang Chendong stretched and looked at Beta Persei, who had returned from sending the guests away. He smiled and said, "How is it? You've been out for so long. You miss Madam?" He. Beta Persei scratched his head and smiled embarrassedly. This cute side of him could only be shown in front of Yang Chendong. In front of others, he was the majestic Beta Persei, who killed people like flies. If you wanna, then just say it. We have been out for more than 6 years. It's time to go back and take a look. When Beta Persei smiled, Yang Chendong already knew the answer and smiled as well. Over the years, Beta Persei had many women by his side when he was out on expeditions. Every time he captured a place, the powerful logistics department would organize the local women of different races to serve the 5-star army. At Beta Persei's level, the women who could be sent to his side were all beautiful women of different races. However, they were still not as good as his wife at home. Can we really go back? This little one, I really miss my children. Beta Persei smiled. Chapter 16:19. If you miss your wife, just say so. Yang Chendong chuckled, then waved his hand and said, "Okay, tell the Black Cavalry to pack up. The ship that will take us back to Chichen City should arrive at Laizhou Prefecture soon. We'll ferry home from there." Yang Chendong was going back to Chichen City. He had been out for more than 6 years. This might not be a big deal for a general who had fought in all directions, but for Bugnam of Gojoseon, Yang Chendong, who was the leader of a force, it was really commendable to do this. After learning the news, Tian, Hu, and the others naturally did not say anything. They just met Yang Chendong and promised to maintain the status quo, and then respectfully sent Yang Chendong out of Nanning Prefecture to Laizhou Prefecture. As Yang Chendong boarded the ship and headed for Chichen City, some changes also took place in the palace of Chichen City. In the palace, all the maids were in a hurry as they walked through the halls. The smiles on their faces were gone, and there was only some tension in their faces. If one looked carefully, one could even see some fear in the tension, because just a few days ago, the 8th Madam's bedchamber was suddenly surrounded by a large number of palace guards, and then it was not long before Junko was ordered to be put under house arrest in the palace. Not only that, all the maids in the palace were taken away, and then there was gossip that those maids were taken to the musical house, and then there would be very miserable sounds coming from there from time to time. The palace of the 8th Madam, which was originally lively and full of vitality, became silent, except for the 8th Madam, Junko, and Princess Yangxian. No one was spared, and all of them disappeared in the palace. The maids in the palace were a new batch, and it was said that they were sent by the princess, Queen Huyen, and they were responsible for monitoring Junko's every move. Since ancient times, the harem and the previous dynasty had a close relationship, which could not be cut off at will, because in many cases, some things in the harem also represented some kind of signal. The harem could affect the previous dynasty, and the previous dynasty could also affect the harem. The 8th Madam was suddenly put under house arrest. Although the news was not publicly spread, some officials in Chichen City still knew about it. After all, it was so big that it was impossible for people to ignore it. In the original palace of Bugnam of Gojoseon, everyone got along very well. The princess, Huyen, was educated and polite, and she was not a troublemaker. Although the other madams had different temperaments, most of them were born poor, and they wanted to fight in the palace. They did not have any clever means. More importantly, as the main character, Yang Chendong had not been in the Wangfu all these years. If they really wanted to fight, who would they fight for? Therefore, the harem in Bugnam of Gojosian Earth was the most peaceful palace. Nothing had happened in all these years, but they never expected that this incident would be so big. They didn't even give a reason to the outside world. The princess consort suddenly took action, and the 8th madam was put under house arrest. Of course, the so-called not giving a reason was because it was not publicly known, but most of the officials knew what was going on. That is, the 8th madam, as a native of Japan, had pleaded with Bugnam of Gojosian for the survival of the ninjas in her country. No matter what the reason was, at least in the eyes of outsiders, Junko had a part to play in it. But now, the ninjas suddenly rebelled. Although they failed to assassinate young Chindong under the rock, their betrayal was exposed. The other 2 special ninjas, Kitamura and Yui Suzuki, also disappeared from the ninja base. This sudden disappearance of them from the 5-star Army's line of sight was enough to explain everything. They were now synonymous with danger and betrayal. Not to mention, more than a month ago, Bugnam of Gojosian's 4th brother, Yang was assassinated in Nanjing, the capital of the Southern Ming dynasty. After investigation, the 5 assassins were all ninjas. All of this proved that they were dangerous. As the 8th madam, Junko, who had pleaded for them, naturally couldn't get away from this matter. The 8th madam was placed under house arrest, which made the palace that was usually very lively became silent. In a restaurant outside the Wang mansion, 2 middle-aged men were sitting and drinking. Because of their arrival, the entire floor they were in had been cleared. To be able to possess such authority, it was rare to see such a person in Crimson City. After all, this was the place where Wunan King's royal city was located. To put it in an exaggerated manner, the number of officials here was more than half of the entire Yang clan's territory. When there were too many officials, their power was naturally not that strong. But if one knew the identity of these 2 middle-aged men, then this matter was not strange. Everything was because these 2 had the surname Yang. One was called Yang Wu, and the other was Yang Lu. That's right, these 2 were servants of the Wunan family. In the entire Yang family, there were only 5 such family retainers. They belonged to the group of people who had followed young Chindong from the very beginning. Now, any one of them was a person of high status and power. Many times, their words were even more influential and effective than some of the Yang faction's chiefs. Now, these 2 servants were sitting together and talking about things. How could outsiders know? Any small matter that they talked about would cause a huge commotion if it was spread out. There's no need to be so formal. Yang Wu said with a smile as he took a bite of food. I'm used to it. Ha ha ha. Yang Lu laughed indifferently. Yang Wu understood Yang Lu's style. He knew that this person was prideful, lived a luxurious life, enjoyed life, and liked power. So, Yang Wu didn't say anything, although doing this would have a negative impact if word got out with their status and, most importantly, their relationship with their master, Yang Chindong. They really didn't care about this little bit of impact. After all, if there was really someone who accused them in front of Yang Chindong, just because they had booked an entire floor of the restaurant, they would at most be warned to be careful. However, whether the person who complained would be able to withstand the combined wrath of the 2 Yang family servants, that was something that they really didn't know. Yang Wu smiled indifferently, and Yang Lu didn't take it seriously either. Back then, he was reprimanded by Yang Chindong and even sent to the Southern Ming Kingdom to manage the intelligence department. Wasn't it because he was prideful and treated people to meals and received gifts every day? Since this impression had already been formed, so what if he went a little overboard? Not to mention, Yang Lu had his reasons for doing this today. It was because some words could only be said in front of the 2 brothers. It was really not suitable to be spread out. 5th brother is the 8th madam really under house arrest? Did those ninjas really listen to the eighth madam's words and betray the young master? Seeing that they were almost done eating and drinking, Yang Lu began to ask questions. If such a question was asked by others, Yang Wu would not only reprimand but also warn the other party not to inquire about it. If it was serious, it was possible that he would directly order people to arrest them. But it was Yang Lu who asked, so it was a different story. He just thought that the other party was curious. Yang Wu smiled and replied, "The matter is so big. How can it be false? The eighth madam is indeed under house arrest. As for whether she is wronged or not, it still needs to be investigated. There will be results before it can be determined. But in my opinion, whether the eighth madam did it or not, I am afraid that this matter has to be blamed." "Oh, why is that?" Yang Lu asked with great interest. "Do you still need to say it?" Yang Wu put down his chopsticks and organized his words. "The ninja's rebellion is a fact. Because the eighth madam had pleaded for her, it is not too much to punish her. This is also the first rebellion that appeared in Yangxia. If it is not dealt with heavily, what if similar things happen in the future? So this time, it can only be said that the eighth madam was unlucky and hit the muzzle of the gun. I am afraid that this matter will not be dealt with properly." "So it is." Yang Lu nodded, as if he just understood, and then said, "Then in fifth brother's opinion, how should we solve it?" "We can't send the eighth madam to the death row, right? Who knows? The young master has already returned by boat. Everything depends on the young master's decision." Although Yang Wu said that he was in Kaisen City all year round, and even the safety of the palace was under his control, he did not dare to say anything about this kind of thing. This was the young master's family matter. As a servant, he only needed to obey and not do anything. "That's right, the young master will be back soon. Everything will be done according to the young master's wishes." Yang Lu's eyes flashed with a light that no one could see, as if there was a hidden meaning in his words. But at this moment, Yang Wu obviously did not understand it. Instead, he thought of another thing. He smiled and patted Yang Lu on the shoulder and said, "Lu, this time you saved the fourth master. You have made a great contribution. This time, the young master will definitely reward you when he comes back. Maybe he will give you a good job. Have you thought of where to go?" This time, it was precisely because of Yang Lu's timely appearance that he was able to save the life of the fourth master, Yang Yangha. With this, Yang Qindong would definitely give him a good job. This was also the reason why Yang Wu said this. "Ha! Let's see how the young master arranges it. Even if he sends me back to the southern Ming dynasty, I am a servant. Everything will be done according to the master's wishes." Yang Lu replied magnanimously, "That's right. As a servant, we should have this kind of awareness. Come, Lu, let me give you a toast." Yang Wu smiled satisfactorily. In his eyes, his sixth brother had changed. He had become more mature. This was a good thing. They were both servants. They had trained together. They had risked their lives together. He sincerely hoped that he could become better. Yang Qindong returned to Kaisen City. He left in 1460 and came back 6 or 7 years later. After almost 7 years, he once again stepped on the new pier of Kaisen City. The accompanying Black Knights and Dragon Guards were also excited, like Yang Qindong. They were also returning to their homeland after nearly 7 years. They were also humans and had their own feelings. Now that they could finally reunite with their families, everyone had a happy smile on their faces. You're tuning in to the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.